I followed Buck onto the wall, feeling the fresh mud and stone beneath my boots. It was a crude, thin barrier, but it was our only hope. Archers and spearmen took their places, breathing heavily. They stared into the terrifying silence of the forest edge. Vic and his men performed final checks on the trench 100 meters ahead. The trench was lined with oil-soaked brush. Vic signaled to me on the wall that all was ready. A suffocating silence hung over the forest. No birds sang. Only the wind rustled the leaves. Soldiers gripped their weapons until their knuckles turned white, sweat dripping onto the rough battlements. Buck stood like a statue beside me, his eyes scanning the forest edge for any movement. Suddenly, thump, 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 a dull, rhythmic thundering, like countless hammers striking the earth, erupted from the deep forest. The chaotic noise quickly synchronized into a heavy, rhythmic beat that hammered against everyone's eardrums and hearts. Trees at the forest edge shook violently. "They're here," Buck roared, shattering the silence. "Everyone, prepare for battle. Stay sharp." The soldiers snapped to attention, adrenaline surging. Arrows were nocked and spears raised. A symphony of heavy breathing and clanking armor. I closed my eyes, sharing vision with Machio, the raven circling above. The aerial view revealed the truth, a black torrent pouring from the forest. A massive, surging beast tide of nightblade panthers, iron bristle boars, rock deer, and forest wolves flooded the clearing. Dust billowed as the beasts charged. I scanned the rear. No giant bears or thorn earth dragons. I exhaled. There were at least 1,000 beasts, but the worst-case scenario was avoided. A deafening roar shattered the forest edge. The black tide surged toward the black territory walls with unstoppable momentum. Buck's traps triggered instantly. The vanguard fell into camouflaged pits, impaled by sharpened stakes, their wails echoing. Following beasts collided with caltrops and tripwires, causing massive pileups. Giant bear traps snapped, pinning legs and stalling the momentum of the charge. The trap zone became a slaughterhouse of broken bones and agonizing roars. The wall erupted in cheers, but the tide was too vast. The beasts trampled their fallen comrades, continuing their relentless advance. The black waves surged over the traps, rushing toward the oil-filled trench. "Archers," I commanded, grabbing a heavy bow and a flaming arrow from my guard. I held my breath, locked onto the center of the trench, and drew the bowstring taut. Whoosh! The flaming arrow tore through the air, whistling toward the trench. Boom! A wall of fire erupted, rising several meters high along the trench. The searing heat engulfed the lead beasts. The stench of burning fur and oil, mixed with the shrieks of dying animals, filled the battlefield. The wall of fire was more spectacular than expected, acting as a roaring dragon between the tide and the wall. The tide hit the fire like waves against a reef, stalling and breaking formation in terror. "Well done. Burn them. Long live the Lord." The soldiers cheered, but Buck's cold voice cut through. "Don't celebrate yet. Archers ready." My heart sank. The firewall was limited in scope. On the flanks, beasts pushed by the mass behind them charged through the flames, scorched and howling. 300 or 400 beasts had breached the fire line. Driven by pain and fury, they charged the stone wall like demons from hell. "Loose! Hum!" A cloud of black arrows rained down, blocking the sky with a shrill whistle. Thuds of arrows hitting flesh and cries of pain replaced the roar of the fire. The front line fell like wheat, but the sheer number of beasts was overwhelming. Second volley. "Loose." Third volley. "Loose." Buck ordered coldly. More beasts fell, but the survivors reached the base of the wall. A massive iron bristle boar, eyes burning red, reared up. It slammed its hooves into the wall. Bang! Stones cracked and dust flew. The impact shook the soldiers' resolve. The newly built wall groaned under the assault. Spearmen thrust. Buck roared. Spearmen drove their weapons through the gaps in the battlements, piercing necks and eyes. The beasts, driven by bloodlust and instinct, ignored the carnage. They trampled their own dead. They climbed, claws digging into stone, horns and tusks tearing at the wall. Stabbed their eyes. Smashed them. Officers screamed over the chaos. The spearmen's arms ached from the mechanical repetition. A boar died with a final shriek, collapsing and taking others with it. A Nightblade panther lunged, grabbing a soldier's spear and dragging him toward the edge. The soldier lost his balance, hanging off the wall. A comrade tried to pull him back, but was knocked aside by a rock deer. Swish! An arrow pierced the panther's eye. The panther released its grip, and the soldier was dragged back to safety, gasping for air. I drew my silver sword, cleaving a wolf in two as it crested the wall. Through the chaos, I spotted something. On a hill behind the battlefield, a figure remained still. It was a giant wolf, larger than the others, with dark silver fur. It did not join the fight, but sat like a commander, observing the slaughter. Whenever the pressure on the wall eased, it let out a sharp howl to redirect the pack. It was commanding them. "Captain Buck," I shouted. "Kill that wolf." "It's commanding them." Buck, having just cleaved a panther in two, looked up. Covered in blood, he locked eyes with the silver wolf. "Wolfgang," Buck roared. "Cover me." "Roar," Wolfgang bellowed. He and 13 Wolfkin warriors leaped from the wall like silver lightning. "Kill." Wolfgang's claws tore through the air, swatting a boar aside as he charged. 13 Wolfkin warriors followed, instantly carving a bloody path through the dense beast horde ahead of Buck. Using their claws and sturdy bodies, they blocked the beast surging from both sides to fill the gap. "Black Raven, charge with me." Without hesitation, Buck leaped from the wall with 6 elite silver-rank Black Raven Knights. They landed on the heads and backs of the beasts, using them as a living bridge to sprint toward the mound. Every swing of Buck's greatsword unleashed blinding golden battle chi, shredding beasts like wheat. The dark silver giant wolf on the mound sensed the threat and let out a series of sharp, urgent howls. The horde, previously focused on the walls, froze before erupting into chaotic frenzy. Abandoning the walls, the beasts turned to swarm Buck's team, halting their momentum and surrounding them. "My lord!" Wolfgang roared in agony, seeing Buck's team encircled. He fought to reach them, but was pinned down by the redirected horde. Though the wall's pressure eased, everyone feared for Buck. Watching the struggle, I felt a surge of burning rage and cold, killing intent shatter my composure. My eyes were bloodshot. "Follow me." I raised my silver sword and jumped from the 4-meter-high wall. I landed with the agility of a white leopard. "My lord!" Eli, Wolfgang, Clark, and Boar screamed, then immediately sprang into action. Wolfgang roared, his wolf claws tearing through the horde to guard me. Clark, his golden eyes burning with battle intent, drew his sword and leaped down. Boar swung his heavy hammer, shouting, "Protect the Lord," as he crashed down like a war machine. "Kill them all. For the Lord." Seeing their leader at the front, the soldiers' fear turned into a fierce, bloody courage. My lone, blood-stained figure ignited their souls, and a roar erupted across the entire wall. Veterans and personal guards followed suit. They poured off the walls like a tidal wave, slamming into the rear of the beasts surrounding Buck. I rolled upon landing, decapitated a forest wolf, and sprinted toward Buck. Breakthrough. Buck saw the white-haired figure cutting through the horde like a blade. My reinforcements struck the flank of the beasts, creating a pincer attack. The soldiers' coordinated assault threw the horde into disarray. A gap opened, and Buck transformed into a golden streak of light. He broke through the final layer, targeting the giant wolf. "Die, beast!" The dark silver wolf showed terror, but Buck's golden sword strike descended like divine judgment. The howl was cut short. The golden battle chi cleaved the wolf and the mound in two. Blood and viscera sprayed as the leader fell, and the remaining beasts lost their will to fight. Their bloodlust turned to confusion and fear. Mournful whimpers replaced their roars. The beasts began to mill about, trampling and biting each other in panic. "Kill them all!" Wolfgang roared, leading the Wolfkin in a slaughter of the broken horde. Clark and Boar joined the pursuit, ensuring none escaped. With the pressure gone, I leaned on my sword, gasping for air amidst the carnage. My white hair was matted with blood, and my armor was stained dark red. I looked over the hellish battlefield where corpses of men and beasts lay piled together. The walls were scarred with claw marks and blood. The air reeked of burnt flesh and rot. The battle had lasted a grueling hour. I knelt, my grip on my sword white-knuckled. The smoke had yet to clear. Shadow Valley, once meticulously planned by Sabuda Medici, was now a ruin. Its proximity to the forest made it suffer more than black territory. Most buildings were reduced to charred rubble. The workshop was a smoking skeleton, and the fields were churned into mud. Defenses were breached, towers collapsed, and the ground was littered with corpses. The dead were piled in twisted heaps throughout the streets. Sabuda sat on the roof of the manor, his face covered in soot and dried blood. His gray eyes, usually filled with ambition, were now numb with grief. It was over. Everything he had invested in was destroyed. Had his father's gold-tier knight and reinforcements not arrived to hold the second wave, he would be dead. Regret gnawed at him like a viper. If only he had listened to Ragnar's warnings about the forest's anomalies. He clenched his fists to suppress his tears. Ragnar approached, looking at the carnage with exhaustion. Hard to find, aren't you, Snake family? Ragnar looked at the surviving villagers with a sigh. Did a single defeat break the Duke's son? You promised to unite the West and expand the Medici influence. The words stung like a blade. Sabuda trembled, his composure fracturing. Humiliation, anger, and responsibility surged within him. A tear escaped, which he quickly wiped away with a bloodied sleeve. Turning his back on the ruins, he commanded hoarsely, Ragnar, count the casualties, secure the supplies, and tend to the survivors. Tell Luke to clear the debris and bury the dead. Now, back at Black Territory, the battle had ended, but the stench of blood and smoke remained just as thick. Soldiers silently cleared the battlefield, their faces numb and exhausted rather than triumphant. Some used makeshift stretchers to carry the recognizable remains of their comrades. Others, suppressing their nausea, dragged the beasts' carcasses into a grim, towering pile. In the relatively safe area behind the walls, a makeshift medical tent was filled with agonizing groans. Lynn Aurora's eyes were bloodshot, her fair face smeared with blood and soot. She worked alongside Scholar Alva and his assistants, moving between the wounded to treat their injuries. The air hung heavy with the scent of herbs and blood. I stood alone on the damaged ramparts. I gripped the cold, rough crenellations, my gaze sweeping over the hellish scene below with a heavy, profound stillness. Captain Buck approached, his armor clanking softly. Buck looked equally drained, his black armor covered in deep claw marks and dents. His wounds were crudely bandaged with blood-soaked rags. My lord, Buck said, his voice low. The initial count is complete. I signaled for him to continue without turning. 47 soldiers dead, mostly recruits killed while defending the walls or in close-quarters combat. 83 critically wounded, suffering from missing limbs or internal injuries. Countless others have minor wounds. The Black Raven Knights lost one, Tiger, a mid-rank silver knight, who died of exhaustion after our charge. 3 others are severely wounded. 5 Wolfkin warriors sustained minor injuries. They are fine. Each number represented a life, a father, son, or brother of the Black Territory. My grip tightened on the wall with every casualty reported. The cost of victory was suffocating. 47 soldiers and a silver knight, the heaviest loss in the Black Territory's history. These young lives, once full of vigor on the training grounds, had fallen forever to protect this land. My lord, Buck hesitated, wanting to say that I had done enough against such a terrifying beast tide. He wanted to call the defense and the countercharge a miracle, but I cut him off with a wave of my hand. I turned, my calm replaced by intensity. I looked past Buck at the silent soldiers and shouted, Brothers! Everyone stopped their work, looking up at the white-haired figure on the ramparts. I scanned their weary, grief-stricken faces. I pointed to the mountain of beast carcasses, the killers of their comrades. Look at these beasts. They took our brothers' lives. They wanted us to fear them, to surrender. But today, we held. We made them pay in blood. Now, I gestured to the carnage. Skin them, dismember them, roast them, stew them, eat them all. Use their flesh to honor our fallen brothers. Tell this damned wasteland. I roared the final words. Obsidian territory. Pendragon. Never surrenders. After a moment of silence, the crowd erupted. Roar. Eat them. Revenge for our brothers. Long live Pendragon. A deafening cry of vengeful satisfaction swept through the valley like an erupting volcano. Lynn looked up from the medical tent at the white-haired figure, who stood like a god of war, igniting everyone's spirit. Her purple eyes held a complex mix of worry, heartache, and pride. Buck stood behind me, watching the white-haired backs standing tall in the morning light. Seeing the soldiers and citizens ignited, a faint smile touched his blood-stained face. He remembered the arrogant young man at the Shadow Valley Alliance who dared to nominate himself as leader. He recalled the commander who, after the bloody battle at Windbreath Plain, suppressed his nausea to organize the aftermath and march on Lucerne City. And he remembered the man who, just an hour ago, jumped off the wall without hesitation to save him. Marquis, Buck whispered internally, your son is a lion forged in the blood and fire of the wasteland. A born king who can carry the territory on his back and ignite his followers with his own spirit. The Black Territory buzzed with life. Soldiers cleared the debris, while women, led by the elders, processed the massive beast carcasses, scraping fat and drying hides in the sun. Butchers divided the dark red meat, salting it and hanging it on wooden racks. Giant bones were crushed and boiled for fat and broth. The previous night's feast had used some of the spoils, but the bounty remained immense. I ordered extra rations for everyone, including the new slaves. After the brief revelry, a sense of stability took hold. The food crisis, a constant threat to the pioneers, had been temporarily dispelled by this bloody victory. Neither the Black Territory nor Lucerne City would need to worry about starvation for a long time. I watched the orderly scene from my fortress window. The prosperity bought with blood brought me some comfort, but the territory needed people. Esther, I turned. My lord, go to Thorn City again. Find Kalen of the North Chamber of Commerce. Tell him the Black Territory and Lucerne City need more people, young, able-bodied laborers. Tell him I want as many as he can get, at the same price as before. Yes. I then sat at my desk and wrote quickly. To Sir Lucius LaRoche, Governor of the West. Your loyal Pendragon reports. The Black Territory has successfully repelled the massive beast tide from the Night Song Forest. The battle was brutal with heavy losses, but the territory stands. The scale of the tide suggests it was no accident, originating from deep within the forest. You must be vigilant. The Black Territory and Lucerne City are rebuilding, but Pendragon will never forget its duty to protect the West. If you have orders, we will serve to the death. I detailed the battle, emphasized my sacrifices, and reaffirmed my loyalty before sealing the letter with the Black Dragon crest. Deliver this personally to Sir Lucius, I said, handing the letter to Esther. Understood. Esther took the letter and left immediately. Shortly after, a knock sounded at the council chamber door. Griffin, Hans, and Amelia entered, looking unusually hesitant and solemn. They exchanged glances, and Griffin finally stepped forward. I found their awkwardness amusing. I leaned back in my chair and asked, Do you three have a big problem? Griffin looked embarrassed, rubbing his hands. Leader, no, Baron. We have a request. If not for your warning and your willingness to take us in, we and our people would have been devoured by the beasts. He added bitterly, this life-or-death struggle made us realize the truth. We are not fit to be lords. When faced with a real crisis, we lack the strength, wisdom, and courage to protect our people. Hans nodded vigorously. Griffin is right. Lord, if not for you, my men wouldn't have survived. Trying to lead them myself would only have led us to death. Amelia stepped forward. My lord, you gave the people of Frost Territory a second chance at life. Continuing as a figurehead only endangers those who trust me. We beg you to take us in. She knelt in a formal gesture of fealty. Griffin and Hans followed suit, kneeling and bowing their heads. We three renounce our status as pioneer lords to become vassals of the Pendragon family. Our loyalty is yours forever. Silence filled the hall. I watched them, realizing the beast tide had shattered their illusions of independence. Their decision to seek protection was pragmatic and wise, earning my respect. I remained silent for a moment, neither feigning modesty nor showing excessive emotion, then gave a slow nod. Very well. The words carried the weight of a solemn vow. Griffin and his companions looked up, eyes filled with relief. I accept your loyalty. I stood and approached them. From this moment, the Easton, Cleve, and Frost territories are under the protection of the Pendragon family. However, you three will continue to manage your former lands. They cheered in gratitude. But remember, I added, submission is not an excuse to slacken. You must restore and develop your lands to support our cause. I pointed to a map. Return with your people and soldiers. I will also dispatch 1 Black Raven Knight and 10 Black Territory veterans to each of you. The 3 were stunned. They had expected to lose their administrative roles, let alone receive reinforcements. Your grace is beyond measure. Griffin choked out. Hans and Amelia pledged their full commitment. I dismissed them, watching them leave with a sense of progress. As I sat to work, hurried footsteps approached. A travel-worn messenger was brought in, presenting a copper tube. My lord, an urgent letter from Brandon in Lucerne City. I read it immediately. Following your orders, we used your 75 soldiers as a core and recruited 125 new ones, totaling 200 to defend Lucerne. Relying on the walls, we faced about 400 scattered beasts, as the city is far from the forest. The defense was manageable. We suffered only 9 deaths and 30 injuries, successfully repelling the tide. Beast meat and furs have been stored. The city is secure, and morale is stabilizing. We need more food supplies. I sighed in relief. Lucerne was safe. Brandon had done well. I set the letter down and looked out the window. In the valley, soldiers processed beast carcasses, women dried furs, and the sounds of wall repairs echoed. The air smelled of blood and musk, yet it was full of life. I felt a simple, almost luxurious desire. If only every day could be like this, without sudden disasters or imminent war. Just steady, peaceful development. How wonderful that would be. Sunlight caught my white hair and weary, sharp profile. This brief peace was a respite bought with the blood of the Black Territory. I rubbed my temples, pushing aside a draft regarding Lucerne's trade dividends. Finally, bang, the heavy oak door flew open. I tensed, hand flying to my silver sword as I stood abruptly. A tawny blur darted past my feet. It leaped onto the desk, scattering documents, ink, and quills. I finally saw the intruder. A marmot? It was abnormally fat, round as a grain sack, with glossy fur and beady eyes. It stood on its hind legs, paws on its hips, glaring at me with an arrogance that defied its cute appearance. Before I could speak, the marmot lunged, head-butting me squarely in the forehead. Thud! I recoiled, stunned, my hand frozen on my sword hilt. My mind went blank. How did this thing bypass my guards? And why had I just been assaulted by a rodent? Eli, what happened? Lynn Aurora rushed in, alerted by the noise. Her eyes lit up at the sight of the creature. Wow, such a cute little mouse. The marmot bristled, first standing on end like an angry ball. It shrieked, Fart! You're the mouse. Your whole family are mice. I am a bear. A mighty, majestic bear. Understand. Blind woman. A talking animal? My blue eyes narrowed. I tensed, my battle chi stirring. My information system had given no warning, and my guards were silent. Friend or foe? Lynn was startled but remained enchanted, her purple eyes filled with amusement. All right, she laughed. A bear, a mighty little bear. She offered a piece of cheese biscuit. Hungry? Want this? Oomph. That's better. The marmot's anger vanished instantly. It sniffed the biscuit, eyeing me suspiciously to gauge the threat. Food went out. It grabbed the biscuit with its tiny paws. Crunch. Time seemed to freeze. The marmot stared, eyes wide. Then, It let out a piercing shriek. Delicious. So good. It rolled on the desk, paws in the air, making joyful squeaks. I stared, expressionless. Adieu, I called. The guard peeked in. Adieu froze upon seeing the rolling creature. This mouse. My lord, how did it get in? I've been at the door the whole time. Mouse. The marmot sat up, eyes blazing at Adieu. It grabbed a quill and hurled it at him. I said, I'm a bear, you idiot. The quill flew in a crooked arc. I swiped it aside with my scabbard without blinking. Go to the kitchen, I said calmly. Bring food. Meat, bread, cheese, fruit. Lots of it. Now. Yes, my lord. Adieu looked at the ink-stained quill, then at the hands-on-hips bear, his worldview shattered. He retreated, stumbling, thinking the world had gone mad. I turned my gaze back to the now-quiet marmot. I pulled up my chair and sat down. My quiet voice stopped the marmot mid-bite. It glared at me with beady eyes. This, bear, I emphasized, unimpressed. Enough theatrics. Introduce yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? And why did you infiltrate my study to find me? The marmot licked its crumbs, savoring the taste. It scanned my stern face and Lin's gentle smile, gauging who was easier to handle. Puffing out its chest, it declared, "Listen well, human lord. I am the great Gulu, the princess's most trusted companion." Princess. My heart skipped. Which one? I'm afraid I'm unfamiliar. Gulu scoffed, slapping the table in disbelief. You're a half-elf and don't know our brilliant, wise, and powerful princess. It tilted its head, pondering. Did your kin never tell you? Or did you just spring from a rock? I realized the creature mistook me for a half-elf due to the moonlight spring. I played along. I have no elf kin. I've never met them. Gulu's arrogance vanished instantly. It scratched its belly, eyes darting guiltily. Its voice dropped to a sheepish mumble. Oh, I see. Then perhaps I was mistaken? Sorry about that. Muttering to itself, it added, I wondered why the princess would care about a human half-breed. The words hit me like a thunderclap. The elf princess was interested in me. Lin reached out, gently tapping Gulu's wet nose. Master Gulu, why does your princess want to see Eli, and where? Her violet eyes sparkled with curiosity. Gulu's attention shifted, and it puffed out its chest again. The princess's mind is unfathomable. Perhaps she likes you, or thinks this place is decent. Gulu trailed off, distracted by a loud growl from its own stomach. It clutched its belly, its dignity crumbling. Forget it. You asked too many questions. I've traveled far. I'm starving. Food. More biscuits. Meat. I need energy to think. It shrieked, bouncing frantically on the table. Lin giggled while I pinched the bridge of my nose, temples throbbing. An elf princess's envoy was this chaotic glutton? The room filled with Gulu's hunger-fueled demands and Lin's laughter. In the corner, the air rippled almost imperceptibly, then stilled. Adu returned, struggling under a heavy tray piled high with food. Gulu. The marmot launched itself like an arrow. It slammed into the tray with surprising force. I watched, twitching. The bear attacked the food with ferocious intensity. Its claws blurred as it tore into the feast, hugging the white cheese and purring with delight. After devouring everything, Gulu slowed down and let out a satisfied, milky burp. It collapsed onto its back in the center of the tray. Its belly was distended like a balloon, its fur stretched tight. It stroked its round stomach, eyes half closed in bliss. I took a breath. Master Gulu, do you remember now? The furry ball barely managed a lazy nod. I braced myself for an answer, but then, snore, snore. A rhythmic snoring filled the room. I froze. I stared at the rising and falling belly and the mountain of bones. A sense of absurdity washed over me. This wasn't a marmot, it was a pig. I rubbed my temples and turned to Lin. Lin, I said, sounding resigned. This bear needs a nap. I'll leave it to you. Lin nodded happily. She carefully picked up the sleeping ball of fur. At the door, she paused, eyes twinkling. Eli, the princess is interested in you. You wouldn't. I wouldn't. I interrupted firmly. I am devoted only to you, Miss Lin. Lin blushed, looking down. She left the room with the sleeping creature. I sighed, the room finally quiet. I looked at my desk, a disaster of ink, grease, and crumbs. I rolled up my sleeves and began cleaning it myself, finding the mundane task soothing. Once finished, I checked the sun, which was already dipping low. Wondering if Sebastian knew anything, I headed to the old butler's room. No answer to my knock. I pushed the door open to find the room empty. I closed it silently. I'd have to solve the elf mystery alone. I walked through the territory, observing the recovery from the beast tide. New housing was being built for the slaves and future arrivals. In the existing district, freemen were reinforcing their homes under the guidance of Old John's craftsmen. Old John stood atop the rising wall, shouting orders. His white beard bobbed with every command. Slaves and freemen worked together, using stone and mortar to fortify the defenses. The walls have been reinforced, and the training grounds are filled with 300 soldiers practicing formations. I gaze across the valley, where the wheat crops are thriving in the sunset. Agricultural Officer Hardy is busy in the fields with experienced farmers, tending to the crops. As the promise of harvest grows, a voice calls out, "My lord." I turn to see the slave manager, Das. Das, a sturdy man, trots over to report on the beast processing. I nod, asking if the work is finished. Das confirms with a booming voice. The last of the bones have been rendered into oil, and everything useful has been categorized. I praise his efficiency and ask for the specific numbers. Das reports 673 tanned hides, and 4 large barrels filled with fangs and claws, 10 barrels of grease, 3 warehouses of dried meat, and 5 barrels of bone oil. I am stunned by the sheer volume of the inheritance left by the beast tide. The hides and fangs pose a storage problem. Das voices his concern. My lord, the quantity is overwhelming. The warehouses are full, and the warmer weather risks insect damage. How should we proceed? I look at my poorly equipped soldiers and the thinly clad laborers. A plan forms in my mind. I speak with calm authority. Take half the hides. Organize all women, whether slave or freeman, to work day and night. Sew simple, durable vests, leggings, and bracers. Focus on utility and warmth. Das stands tall, eager to comply. As for the other half, I add, select the best quality and store them carefully. I have other plans for those. Das acknowledges the order. Finally, I instruct, take the fangs, claws, and a third of the remaining hides, and pack them securely. Das, lead a reliable team to Thorn City. Find the North Chamber of Commerce. Tell them these are special products from Pendragon. Trade them for grain, salt, iron, and tools. Das, energized, salutes and departs. I survey my growing walls, training troops, and lush fields. Progress must be made one step at a time. The self-proclaimed Great Galu had slept for 2 days and nights. I had checked on the groundhog several times, poking its belly. By the 3rd morning, the basket was empty, save for a few brown hairs. The Great Galu had vanished without a trace or a note. When Lynn Aurora reports the disappearance, I am unfazed. I assume the creature was just a freeloader and am glad for the silence. Amidst the constant flow of duties, a rare period of calm has arrived. Construction and training continue steadily. Hides are being turned into gear, and the trade caravan is en route to Thorn City. To release pent-up energy, I train on the grounds. I wear a simple linen shirt, my white hair tied back. I grip a heavy training greatsword, poised for action. His opponent is Captain Buck. Though Buck wears no armor, his presence remains imposing. Buck roars and charges. He delivers a powerful, fundamental overhead strike. I narrow my eyes, choosing to evade rather than block. I slide aside, narrowly dodging the blow that could have shattered stone. I counter, thrusting my sword toward Buck's exposed flank. Buck reacts instantly, parrying the strike with his own blade. The impact numbs my hand, but my fighting spirit only intensifies. I steady myself, ready to face Buck's relentless assault. Soldiers gather, watching the intense duel with bated breath. Seeing their lord hold his own against a gold-rank warrior inspires them. If the lord is training this hard, they have no excuse to slack off. Buck's assault lasts 15 minutes. I, like a rock in a storm, hold my ground. I channel my battle chi, applying Buck's techniques under immense pressure. Buck finally stops, offering a rare word of praise. Not bad. Your bronze high rank is now stable. I pant heavily, smiling at the validation. I retreat to rest and focus my mind. A blue screen appears, followed by a sudden, ominous purple glow. Purple. Rein, commander of Kyle City, knows Lucerne City has fallen. He mistakenly believes the Western Border Army is responsible and has reinforced his defenses. My smile vanishes. Kyle City is a strategic fortress, far more formidable than Lucerne. Rein is likely a much more dangerous opponent than Baron Grum. However, the intelligence reveals Rein's fear of the Western Border Army. I realize I can use this misunderstanding to my advantage. Kid, a loud voice booms from the edge of the field. Master Glenn approaches, his stout figure moving with purpose. He carries a cloth-wrapped object. Just in time, he unwraps the cloth to reveal a long sword. The blade is sleek, rugged, and possesses a strange, faint luster. Look, Glenn says proudly. This is the prototype for our future standard-issue sword. He taps the blade, producing a clear ring. I mixed in a small amount of mithril. He hands the sword to me. Try it. The balance is perfect, and the weight is ideal. My eyes light up. Master Glenn had actually succeeded in using mithril for mass production. I scanned the soldiers and beckoned Loire, who stepped forward, chest puffed with excitement. Give me your sword, I commanded. Loire handed over his standard-issue iron blade, drawing the gaze of everyone present. As the Lord prepared to test a new weapon, I gripped the mithril alloy sword forged by Master Glenn in my right hand and the standard iron blade in my left. Without using battle chi or fancy techniques, I swung the new sword like I was chopping wood. The blade descended squarely onto the center of the iron sword held in my left hand. Clang snap. Under the gaze of hundreds, the sturdy iron sword shattered like a brittle twig. The upper half clattered to the ground, its cross-section smooth as a mirror. The training ground erupted in gasps and stunned exclamations. Loire stood with his mouth agape, staring blankly at his broken companion. I smiled, satisfied. The result exceeded my expectations. I weighed the new sword, praising it. Master Glenn, excellent work. Ha! Master Glenn laughed proudly. Naturally. Look whose handiwork it is. Captain Buck stepped forward, inspecting the smooth break on the old sword and testing the edge of the new one. Remarkable. Far superior in toughness and sharpness, Buck noted. I turned to the stunned Loire and, amidst the envious stares of the soldiers, handed the mithril alloy sword to him. This sword is yours. Loire blinked, bewildered, looking from the sword to me. Take it, I said firmly. Loire trembled, overwhelmed by joy and a sudden sense of responsibility. He knelt, receiving the sword with trembling hands as if it were a holy relic. Thank you, my lord. Loire choked out, clutching the blade to his chest. Loire, I will follow you to the death. Damn it, lucky bastard. The crowd erupted in jealous wails. The soldiers' gazes burned with envy, directed at Loire and his new treasure. I patted Loire's shoulder. Use it well. Protect yourself, your home, and your comrades. I added with a smile. And may you always be lucky. The training ground roared with good-natured laughter and cheers of lucky Loire. Loire blushed, embarrassed yet resolute. In the study of the LaRoche estate in Thorn City, Lucius sat behind his desk, cold and statue-like. He was reading a letter from Baron Pendragon of the Obsidian Territory. Large-scale beast tied from the Night Song Forest, far beyond records. Obsidian Territory repelled them at great cost. Lucerne City also attacked and repelled. The return of the beast tide is likely no accident. You must be vigilant. Lucius touched the words beast tide, his fingertips cold. Across from him, Marquis Marcus looked up from his supply lists, brows furrowed. Beast tide. That ancient relic that disappeared with the elves? Eli wrote this. He asked, wary of the term. Lucius pushed the letter toward Marcus, his gaze fixed on the distant, dangerous forest. Its return means the balance is broken. Old orders are loosening. Something ancient is stirring. Marcus read the letter, his rugged face showing shock. So many beasts. That kid actually held them off. He looked at Lucius. Is this a major turning point? Lucius sighed, a long, weary sound. A troubled time indeed, he said, regaining his composure. But since Obsidian and Lucerne held them off, the scale isn't yet the legendary, world-ending disaster. It remains manageable for the western border. Marcus nodded. True. As long as it's not an overwhelming tide, our defenses and Eli's front line should hold. He returned to his lists, dismissing the threat. Lucius looked back at the letter, his eyes flickering with complex emotions as he touched the Pendragon signature. After a silence, he murmured, Besides, this might be a good thing. Marcus looked up, confused. A beast tide is good. Lucius sipped his cold tea. Other territories near the forest are likely suffering too. This pressure acts like a sword hanging over their heads. It prevents new factions from growing too quickly and becoming uncontrollable. Marcus laughed loudly. Lucius, you are cold-blooded. Didn't you praise Eli for his independence just the other day? Lucius remained unmoved. Appreciation is personal. Stability and order are my duty. I am myself, and the West is the West. Personal feelings must not override the big picture. That is the duty of a ruler. Marcus stopped laughing, shaking his head at Lucius's expressionless face. You politicians have dirty hearts. He returned to his lists. Meanwhile, in the Obsidian Territory fortress, I sat under flickering lights. I finished the last document regarding Lucerne's supplies and rubbed my tired eyes. Rhine's intelligence from Kyle City weighed on me. Since you think it's the regular army, I dipped my pen to write. Noland, Immediately hang the LaRoche family's roaring golden lion flag at the highest point of Lucerne City's walls. No explanations needed. Just do it. Be cautious. Eli Pendragon. I paused at the signature. Hanging the LaRoche flag was a blatant bluff, using their name to intimidate. The risk was high. If Lucius discovered my intent, the consequences would be dire. But to buy time and deter Rhine and Kyle City, it was the most effective method. It also served as a show of loyalty to the LaRoche family. I dried the ink, rolled the letter, and tied it with a silk cord. I opened the window. Screech. A sharp cry pierced the night. Machio, like a shadow, landed on the windowsill, its obsidian eyes fixed on the letter. I attached the letter tube to the copper ring on Machio's leg, stroking its smooth, cold feathers. Machio, go to Lucerne City. Find Noland, I whispered. The clever raven had long since memorized the route. This avian messenger would now handle routine communication with Lucerne City, eliminating the risks and delays of human couriers. Machio nudged my finger with its beak before spreading its black wings and vanishing into the night. I closed the window, leaving the study quiet save for the crackle of candles. I surveyed the tidy, empty study, my gaze lingering on the hardwood chair Sebastian usually occupied. The mysterious old butler had vanished completely since their return from the Night Song Forest. He had left without a trace, just as he always did. I frowned. Had the encounter in the forest, the beast worship and the soul-piercing whispers, affected me? Or had he discovered something urgent? Or perhaps my own existence was tied to the forest's secrets? The old butler's presence was always so faint it was easily overlooked. Wait, could the whispers in my mind be those of the princess Gula mentioned? It was highly likely. As I pondered, a gentle weight pressed against my left shoulder. I turned to find Lynn Aurora behind me. Exhausted, she leaned her forehead against my shoulder, resting her weight on me. Her long lashes fluttered like tired butterfly wings, her breathing shallow and steady. A few strands of hair brushed my neck. She had fallen asleep. My expression softened, and I moved carefully to avoid waking her. I scooped her up, one arm under her knees and the other supporting her back. Lynn murmured softly in her sleep as she was moved. She instinctively nuzzled into me, finding a comfortable position before drifting back into deep slumber. She surrendered herself to me with complete, defenseless trust. I carried her through the silent corridor toward our bedroom. I laid her gently on the bed and tucked her in. Watching her peaceful face, I leaned down and pressed a feather-light kiss to her forehead. Outside, the night was deep. I extinguished the last wall lamp. Work ends here for today, I whispered, though more important matters awaited. Thump, thump, thump. A frantic, rhythmic pounding shattered the silence of the Lord's fortress. The force of the knocks made the heavy oak door groan. I and Lynn awoke instantly, my blue eyes turned sharp as a hawk's. Lynn gasped, her violet eyes filled with confusion and unease. Hey, the sun is up. Get up, you lazybones. A shrill, piercing voice echoed through the room. Lynn smiled helplessly. It's Gulu. She's back. I scowled at the mention of the lawless marmot. Lynn pushed me lightly and rose, her silhouette graceful in the morning light. She dressed quickly, her fair skin flashing in the dim light. I watched her for a moment before the noise outside reignited my irritation. I rolled out of bed, moving silently in my thin shirt and trousers. I grabbed my silver sword, its cold scabbard in hand. As Lynn turned, I kicked the door open with immense force. The heavy door swung outward like a battering ram, catching Gulu off guard. The round creature was sent flying like a kicked ball, shrieking in surprise. Gulalu thud. It tumbled across the stone floor, landing on its back with all four paws in the air. Audacious. Do you know who I am? Gulu scrambled up, eyes blazing, but stopped abruptly. I stood in the doorway, my tall frame silhouetted against the morning light, radiating intense pressure. I held the cold scabbard tip against Gulu's tiny neck. The creature's arrogance vanished. Speak, I said, my voice icy. Who are you? Gulu's teeth chattered. I really was sent by the princess. I'm the great Gulu. I'm not lying. It tried to push the scabbard away, but its strength was negligible. I remembered. The meeting place. I ran back just to tell you. Humph. I eased my grip. This elusive marmot was hard to trust. Eli. Lynn stepped forward, tugging my sleeve. Let her go. She looks terrified. I looked from Lin's worried face to the trembling marmot. Lin's, please soften me. I pulled the scabbard away. Gulu gasped for air, collapsing on the floor, its eyes wide with lingering shock. Lin crouched and offered a piece of fragrant cheese. Gulu, don't be afraid. Have a snack. The aroma was irresistible. Gulu's fear warred with its appetite, but hunger won. It snatched the cheese and began to nibble rapidly, its tension fading with every bite. Watching the creature eat, my irritation dissipated. I sighed, my voice steady and apologetic. My reaction was excessive. My apologies, Gulu. Humph. Gulu paused, sniffing indignantly. Young people today are so hot-headed, always drawing swords. No respect for elders or small animals. Back in my day, it started to boast but stopped when it saw my expressionless face, returning to its cheese. Gulu, where were you yesterday? Lin asked. Gulu looked up. I was just wandering around. After finishing the cheese, Gulu licked its paws. Lin, you're a good person. Gulu will protect you. It looked at her empty hands. Then I interrupted. Is the location clear? Can we go? Gulu patted its belly and stood tall. Of course. Deep in the Night Song Forest. A very special place. It pointed a small claw at me. You come with me. Only you. That's the princess's order. Only me? My brow furrowed. Venturing alone into the core of the forest, where the beast tide had erupted and unknown elven power lingered, was a massive risk. If only Sebastian were here, the mysterious butler would have given me some peace of mind. I nodded slowly. Fine. When do we leave? Since I had chosen this path, there was no turning back. The elf princess was the key. Gulu waved a small claw, satisfied. Now, while it's cool, Eli. Lin Aurora's purple eyes brimmed with worry as she stepped forward to gently hold my hand. I squeezed her cool hand, offering a steady, reassuring look. Don't worry. I'll return soon. The territory is in your hands. Trusting her to hold the fort, Lin took a deep breath, nodded, and stepped back. Be careful. Hey, are we going or not? Stop dawdling. Gulu urged impatiently, hopping ahead. I followed. As we left, Gulu recalled its tour of the Obsidian territory the previous night. The reinforced walls, the bustling training grounds, and the orderly living quarters. It had seen soldiers' reverence, the rare peace among slaves and free citizens, and women and children in safe zones. It lacked the chaos and brutality of human cities. There was an inexplicable sense of order and cohesion. Oomph. No wonder the princess is interested, Gulu muttered, scratching its belly. This young man, he actually has some skill, even if he is a bit hot-tempered. Hey, stop spacing out. Lead the way. I called out impatiently. Coming. Stop rushing me. Young people have no patience. Gulu grumbled, picking up the pace. We headed into the depths of the Night Song Forest under the rising sun. Deep in the forest, the canopy blocked almost all sunlight, leaving only dappled light on the ground. I walked steadily over the soft moss. Behind me, the round creature panted, struggling to keep up. Hey, human, Gulu squeaked for the umpteenth time. My legs are about to break. Can't you show some knightly spirit and carry me? Just a little bit. I didn't look back. Fourth time, no. Gulu was more demanding than a princess. You're cold, heartless, and cruel to small animals. Gulu stomped its feet in frustration, but my back remained unmoved. Resigned, Gulu continued to waddle along, muttering mosquito-like complaints. We walked on in silence. I scanned the ancient trees, my vigilance in the deep forest never wavering. I broke the silence. Gulu. What? Gulu snapped. You claim to be the princess's most trusted companion. Then, shouldn't you be quite powerful? At least, not like this. This hit a nerve. Oh, whoa. Gulu shrieked and launched itself like a firecracker. It slammed into my leg. I didn't budge, but Gulu was sent spinning, landing on its backside with stars in its eyes. It glared at me, rubbing its head. What do you know? My power is sealed. A powerful seal. Once I break it, I'll pin you to the ground with one finger. You look down on the great Gulu at your own peril. I twitched my mouth, skeptical of the seal. We continued in silence for another half hour until I suddenly stopped. Ouch! Gulu, lost in its own grumbling, slammed head first into my leg. Why did you stop? Gulu demanded, clutching its forehead. But when it saw what lay ahead, its anger vanished. I was transfixed. The dense forest suddenly gave way to a breathtaking, massive lake. The water was a deep, pure blue-green, like melted emeralds spread across the earth. It was perfectly still, a mirror reflecting the fragmented sky and the surrounding trees. The winding shoreline was dotted with glowing, fragrant flowers. The air was incredibly fresh, filled with the scent of life. The sheer beauty left my mind blank. I had seen the desolation of the wasteland and the fires of obsidian territory, but never such a pure, shocking natural wonder. Beautiful, was all I could think. Gulu puffed out its chest, hopping to my side. See that, puny human? This is a real place. 1,000,000 times better than your stinking stone cities. This is nature's gift. The elf's sanctuary. Gulu trotted to the water's edge. It shouted at the mirror-like surface. Hey, I brought him. Valerian. Open up. The sound echoed across the lake. My pupils constricted to pinpricks. The calm water began to bulge upward without warning. It churned as a massive head covered in dark blue diamond-shaped scales broke the surface, water cascading off its cold, smooth armor. The head was ferocious and majestic, like a dragon. Huge golden, vertical pupils opened, locking onto me. An ancient, terrifying pressure washed over me like a tsunami. My hand, gripping my silver sword, trembled uncontrollably. A dragon? Sleeping in the lake? No. As the head rose, revealing a long, graceful neck, I noticed a key difference. There were no claws, no limbs, just a long, powerful body covered in dark blue scales, like a giant serpent. It looked like a dragon, but lacked claws. What was it? Valerian's golden eyes swept over me with indifference. The beast turned its head toward Gulu, as if confirming something. Then, to my horror, Valerian opened its maw, filled with sharp teeth. There was no roar. Instead, a transparent staircase made of flowing water appeared above the lake. The sides were walls of liquid crystal. Water manipulation. I was stunned. Stop staring. Follow me, Gulu shouted, hopping onto the magical water stairs. I looked at the path to the unknown depths and the cold, golden eyes at the entrance. The pressure remained like invisible shackles. I took a deep breath, suppressing my instinct to flee. I had survived the beast tide. I would not show cowardice now. I stepped onto the cool, solid water. On both sides, water walls flowed, revealing swaying underwater forests and schools of colorful fish swimming nearby. The scene reminded me of an underwater tunnel, though far more surreal and magical. The passage descended into darkness, yet the lake water emitted a soft, gentle glow, preventing any sense of gloom. After walking a few hundred paces, the tunnel opened into a vast, dry chamber. In the center stood an archway carved from a single piece of white, glowing jade. Gulu pressed its paws against the gate, triggering a strange light as it slowly opened. It glanced back at me with a sly, mischievous glint in its eyes and cleared its throat. Heh, kid, since you've delivered yourself to my doorstep, it boasted, patting the jade gate. Prepare to die? Inside, that is enough, Gulu. A voice, like wind chimes in a silent valley, echoed through the space. It was the same ethereal whisper that had once touched my soul in the night song forest. Gulu's threat died in its throat, and it shrank back. Gulu made a face, clearly annoyed at the interruption. As the voice spoke, the space ahead rippled. To my disbelief, the air above the jade pedestal in the center of the palace shimmered like water. A figure appeared silently, as if she had always been there. She sat upon a throne carved from pure crystal, her silver hair cascading like a waterfall of moonlight to the floor. Her features were a masterpiece, possessing a beauty that transcended the mortal realm. Her eyes were like the deepest starry sky, calm and still. Dressed in ancient silver robes, she was the embodiment of beauty. My mind went blank, my heart skipping a beat. Summoning my willpower, I lowered my gaze to suppress the urge to kneel in worship. I inhaled deeply, placed my right fist over my heart, and bowed low. Eli Black, greets your highness. As my greeting echoed, a gentle but irresistible force straightened my posture. Princess Irene watched me calmly. No need for such formalities. She turned her gaze to Gulu, who was trying to puff out its chest, her expression tinged with faint helplessness. Gulu is mischievous, It must have caused you trouble along the way. Hey, princess. I did not. Gulu protested, hands on its hips. I performed my duty perfectly. I was almost killed by this violent human. He's the one who caused me trouble. I looked at the sputtering creature, my voice steady and sincere. Your Highness, you are too kind. Gulu is pure-hearted, lively, and... I paused, my tone natural. Powerful and mighty. It protected me faithfully. It is an honor for the Pendragons. Ha. Gulu's indignation shattered instantly. Ha. Powerful and mighty. Well said. You finally have an eye for talent, human kid. Ha. I am indeed powerful and mighty. It rolled around, kicking its legs like an out-of-control ball of yarn. On the throne, the cold lines of Irene's perfect face softened, her lips curling into an involuntary smile. She shook her head with a sigh of indulgence. Clearly, my deadpan flattery amused even her. The atmosphere lightened. Sensing this, I cut to the chase. Your Highness, why have you summoned a Pendragon? Irene's expression returned to calm. Ignoring the question, her starry eyes fixed on my white hair. Are you an elf? This was it, the critical question. I prepared to lie, but a firm, clear word escaped my lips instead. No. My pupils constricted. What was happening? My body felt controlled by an invisible force. I stared into those calm, starry eyes, feeling completely exposed. I could only watch as my mouth spoke against my will. I am not an elf. I merely discovered and absorbed a moonlight spring from an elven ruin. What? Gulu sat bolt upright, its black eyes wide. Moonlight spring. You consumed our sacred elven spring? That is a relic reserved for the royal bloodline. No wonder Valerian looked at you twice. You. Gulu stammered, trembling as if I had committed a heinous crime. My heart sank. I stood stiffly, feeling the dual pressure of Gulu's screeching and Irene's calm gaze. I realized I was utterly exposed. With no leverage, I knelt on one knee. Your Highness, I did not intend to offend by taking the spring, but as it is done, I will accept the consequences. I surrendered the choice to her. The jade chamber fell silent. After a moment, her ethereal voice returned, devoid of emotion. The moonlight spring is indeed our highest sacred relic. Over the ages, few springs remain. Finding one and absorbing its essence is your destiny. Her tone was flat, easing my tension slightly. She wasn't immediately striking him down. However, Irene continued, destiny is one thing, but there must be a reckoning. I braced myself. A sly glint appeared in Irene's eyes. Over 500 years ago, a bold human infiltrated our sacred grounds and stole a particularly important treasure. 500 years ago. I looked up, blue eyes questioning. Irene's gaze was playful. You have likely heard the name of that human. His name was Caesar Aurora. The name struck me like a thunderbolt. The founding emperor of the Orlando Kingdom? The ancestor of the Aurora family? Your Highness. My voice was dry from shock. Are you saying you want me to confront the royal family? To retrieve the stolen treasure? It was absurd. Fighting the foundation of a kingdom? Please, just kill me instead, I said with desperate calm. Irene finally chuckled, the sound like spring water hitting jade, breaking the tension. Of course not now, she teased. I have just awakened. Why the rush? You are too weak. I remained silent. Though insulted, the weight on my chest lifted. As long as I wasn't dying today. For now, do one thing, Irene said, her voice steady. Survive. Grow stronger. Develop your territory. When your power is enough to catch my attention, I will tell you what must be done. I felt bitter. The price of the moonlight spring was heavier than expected, a shackle placed around my neck. I was now bound to this mysterious elven princess. But I had no choice. Faced with absolute power and the undeniable fact of the spring, I was trapped. I inhaled, bowed my head, and regained my composure. I understand. I will obey. Good, Irene said, rising gracefully. Remember my name, Irene. I will contact you if needed. Yes, Princess Irene, I replied respectfully. Oh, one more thing, Irene said, as if remembering something, and waved her slender hand. Space twisted slightly. To my and Gulu's surprise, an ancient, weathered longsword appeared in the air before Irene. It was not held, but plunged tip-first into a waist-high, gray-white boulder. The blade and stone were fused as one. A gift for our first meeting, Irene said with a smirk, pointing at the sword. They say, this is the sword of the king, passed down through the elves. Ancient prophecy claims only a true king can draw it from the stone. Do you dare try? Gulu's black eyes brightened. He curiously approached the sword and poked the cold hilt with a tiny claw. I looked at the legendary sword with a calm, unruffled gaze. The old butler's words echoed. Destiny's gifts always come with a price. I paused, then looked at Queen Irene. Princess, you are mistaken. It isn't the one who draws the sword that becomes king. Only the sword in a king's hand becomes the sword of the king. This blade itself decides nothing. The space fell silent. Gulu, startled by a sudden pulse from the sword, was knocked over. Irene's composed, teasing expression shifted to genuine shock. She studied me with newfound, complex intrigue. You are right, Eli. After a long silence, Irene spoke again, her ethereal voice carrying an indescribable nuance. With a wave of her hand, the sword and the stone vanished into thin air. Go! A gentle light enveloped me, and I vanished. Gulu pouted at the empty spot, sniffing in disdain. Acting all cool, disrespecting the princess. He's just afraid he couldn't pull it out. Gulu hopped to Irene's feet. Princess, what do you think? He's ill-tempered and fierce. But he's quite smart, and his territory is actually coming along well, Gulu added with mock seriousness. Besides, having absorbed the moonlight spring, he's the only male elf left. Our race's survival. Before he could finish, a massive, invisible force slammed into him. Ah! With a sharp shriek, the great Gulu was launched like a furry ball. He slammed into the smooth jade wall, embedding himself into the stone with limbs splayed. Irene stared at the spot where I had vanished, her starry eyes swirling with complex, unreadable emotions. Finally, she whispered, an interesting human. I reappeared by the lake. It remained calm. I rubbed my temples, confirming this wasn't a dream. Where's Gulu? I wondered, offering a self-deprecating smile. I had hoped to ask about the beast tide that nearly destroyed Black territory and its connection to the elves, but I had been dismissed before I could speak. I shook off the thought. The princess and the royal family were too far above my station. As a small baron, I had to focus on my own path. I took one last look at the lake and turned to leave. The ancient trees closed behind me. As I neared Black territory, a sense of relief washed over me. I was back. The stone wall at the valley's edge had grown, its fresh, damp mud glistening in the sun. Though unfinished, the visible progress brought a satisfied smile to my face. My lord, the lord is back. The sheriff at the gate saluted with awe as he spotted the white-haired figure. I waved, and the heavy gates creaked open. I walked to the fortress, where Lynn Aurora was busy at her desk. She spun around, her purple eyes lighting up as she rushed to greet me. Seeing I was uninjured, the hidden worry in her eyes vanished. Did you see the princess? What was she like? She paused, looking behind me. Where is Gulu? I smirked. That noisy rodent? Too loud, so I roasted and ate him. Lynn pouted and punched my chest. Stop teasing. Where is he? A frantic knocking interrupted them. Esther entered, followed by Kalen of the North Chamber of Commerce and Pierre. My lord, managers Kalen and Pierre are here, Esther announced. Kalen bowed deeply, his face wreathed in professional flattery. My lord, your territory changes daily. This wall is as magnificent as Thorn City's. Pierre chimed in. Indeed. Your ability is legendary. I stared at them with cold, blue eyes, silencing the flattery. Skip the pleasantries. Get to the point. Kalen straightened up. We met your manager, Das, while heading south. Das had a massive haul of beast hides, claws, and teeth. We traded them immediately for grain, salt, and iron as requested. The trade went smoothly. All supplies are waiting outside the valley, and Das is there overseeing the unloading. I nodded, satisfied. Kalen and Pierre exhaled in relief. It is our honor to serve you. Kalen rubbed his hands, reaching the main topic. Regarding the labor Esther requested. My gaze sharpened. How many? Kalen carefully held up one finger, then 5. 1,500, my lord. All hand-picked, strong, and capable workers. He added quickly, fearing I might think it too many. We split them into 2 groups for transport. 800 are outside now. The rest arrive in 3 days. How many do you need? All of them, I replied flatly. Kalen's jaw dropped, and Pierre gasped in shock. All of them. Kalen trembled, wondering if he'd misheard. 1,500 slaves were a massive logistical cost. Had the Baron found a gold mine? Pierre stammered. Are you sure, my lord? I am sure, I said calmly. Keep the first batch here. The second batch. I paused. Send them to Lucerne City for Lord Noland. Tell him they are my gift for him to manage. Kalen and Pierre nodded mechanically, their minds reeling. Yes, my lord. First batch here, second to Lord Noland in Lucerne. After the shock came pure joy. This was one of the largest slave trades in the North Chamber's history. Kalen suppressed his racing heart, trying to keep his voice steady. Then, my lord, regarding the agreed price, considering the distance and the sheer volume. The total is 1,042 gold coins. But as our most valued client, we'll waive the remainder. Let's call it an even 1,000. His voice trembled as he spoke, his eyes fixed on me, fearing the Baron might retract the deal or demand a lower price. I didn't hesitate. Agreed. Esther. Yes, young master. Esther stepped forward. Go to the vault. I instinctively meant to tell her to fetch Sebastian, only to remember the mysterious steward remained missing. A flicker of melancholy passed through me, and I corrected myself. Follow me. I'll take you to collect it. Kalen and Pierre bowed. Yes, my lord. Shortly after, the gold was loaded onto the wagons. Seeing the scale of my territory, Kalen felt a desire to build a deeper connection. He hesitated, then asked, Baron, would you be open to a merchant's advice? I looked curious. Oh, speak. Kalen exhaled in relief. My lord, it was our oversight. The scale of our slave transport was perhaps too conspicuous. It drew unwanted attention. I haven't leaked any information about you, of course. But I sensed certain gazes on the way to the Black Territory. I frowned, realizing I had become too prominent. Kalen nodded cautiously. To Kalen's shock, I bowed to thank him. Kalen hurriedly stepped aside. My lord, you mustn't. The North Chamber of Commerce wagons departed the valley. Pierre sat on the bumpy wagon, still dazed. Manager Kalen, another 1,000 gold coins. Just like that? That Baron, what exactly is he? He wanted to ask how much wealth I possessed, but deemed the question too rude and foolish. Kalen leaned against the cargo, his merchant's shrewdness returning to his eyes. He stroked his chin and spoke slowly. Pierre, remember today, Baron Pendragon is unlike anyone else. Either he is backed by an unimaginable power, or, he lowered his voice, he possesses a river of gold himself. Regardless, he is not someone we can offend or even fathom. Treat the Black Territory with the utmost importance. This may be the most profitable deal our chamber makes in 20 years. Pierre nodded firmly, finally understanding. A new power was rising in the forgotten southwest border, and the North Chamber of Commerce was fortunate enough to be riding that wave. I stood on the fortress balcony. I watched the wagons carrying my gold depart the valley. 1,000 gold coins for 1,500 mouths to feed and labor for construction. Was it worth it? On paper, it was a loss. But for someone rooting themselves in the wasteland, population was the most precious resource. I turned away. Near the new residential area, the site was bustling. 800 new slaves, led by Ulu and Das, were being organized into crooked lines. Line up. Don't push. Squad leaders, step forward and manage your people. Ulu's voice was hoarse. Over here. Manager Ulu, bring the 20th squad this way. Das directed the slaves toward newly built wooden sheds. Though crude, the sheds provided shelter. I watched quietly from the sidelines as Ulu and Das brought order to the chaos. The slaves looked fearful but remained calm. As the last squad entered the sheds, Ulu wiped his brow and sighed. He turned and spotted the white-haired figure. My lord. Ulu startled and nudged Das. Das, quick. The lord is here. They hurried over and bowed. My lord, everything is settled. 800 people divided into 8 squads. With the previous 17, we now have 25 slave squads in the Obsidian territory. He spoke with pride and awe. My lord, counting the knights, soldiers, freemen, and craftsmen. There are nearly 3,000 people in this valley now. All thanks to your grace, great lord. Nearly 3,000. I repeated, scanning the thriving camp. In a few months, they had grown from 100 exiles to thousands. It should have been a triumph. Yet, Ulu's praise and the sheer scale of the population felt like a thorn. Kalen's warning about being too conspicuous echoed in my mind. I frowned, lost in thought. Ulu's excitement froze, fearing he had misspoken. Das, simpler-minded, thought I was concerned about supplies. My lord, the grain, salt, and iron from Thorn City are in the warehouse. John has already taken iron for the walls. Hardy has also taken some grain. My expression softened as I nodded at Das. Good work, Das. Das blushed, scratching his head. It was mostly Manager Kalen's help. He even treated me to a meal. I smiled helplessly. That's shrewd, Kalen. Merchants seek profit, but they also know how to invest in people. Kalen's diligence was a bet on the money tree. That was the Black Territory. I looked back at the camp. A group of children, 6 or 7 years old, watched the soldiers training with a mix of fear and curiosity. A plan formed in my mind. I turned to Ulu. Ulu, organize a census. Count everyone in the valley, slaves, freemen, craftsmen, and families, under 12 years old. Separate them by gender and age. Ulu was stunned, not understanding the reason, but he immediately nodded. I nodded and left the bustling settlement area, heading toward the Lord's fortress along the main road. Soldiers, freemen, and slaves alike paused their work to bow respectfully as I passed. I offered only a slight nod, my mind already elsewhere. Kalen's warning had rippled through my thoughts like a stone dropped in a still lake. Being the first Baron among the expansion knights was an anomaly that broke all conventions. Taking Lucerne City, repelling the beast tide, and conducting massive slave trades totaling 2,300 people in the resource-starved West was unprecedented. It was as conspicuous as a torch in the dark. The traditional nobles entrenched in the West would surely resent a castaway thriving on their former lands. They would wonder how I, holding only a barren corner of the Black Territory, could afford such growth. Lucerne was merely a minor city in the West. How could I support such a population and construction? They would suspect I had discovered a great treasure in the wilderness. These suspicious gazes would act like invisible thorns. The most dangerous gaze belonged to Sir Lucius LaRoche, the powerful ruler of Thorn City. Lucius had supported me to create a bulwark against the Federation and to encourage investment in expansion knights. But a tool that grew too powerful and uncontrollable was no longer desirable. Would Lucius tolerate such rapid expansion under his nose? I stopped at the steps of the fortress. Looking at the rough stone walls and the bustling valley below, a heavy sense of responsibility settled over me. I was no longer just a survivor. The lives and futures of nearly 5,000 people in the Black Territory and Lucerne City rested on my shoulders. I exhaled. Visibility meant risk. I needed to heed Kalen. Shift from being conspicuous to inconspicuous. I had to lie low, digest my gains, and turn the new population into productive labor and defensive strength. I would focus on fortifying walls, training troops, and stockpiling supplies. Only deep roots would allow me to stand firm against future storms. The next day, the council chamber felt unusually solemn. I sat at the head of the table, breaking the silence. The rapid population growth in the Black Territory and Lucerne brings labor, but also pressure and unnecessary attention. I noted, tapping the table. Kalen warned me that our recent actions have been too conspicuous. Buck, Scholar Alva, and Old John exchanged knowing glances. As the first Baron among the expansion knights, our victories and massive slave trades have drawn the eyes of Thorn City and the royal capital. Suspicion and hostility may follow. Therefore, our policy for the coming period is low profile, digestion, and stabilization. We will pause large-scale external trade and focus on internal strength, fortifying walls, training, and farming. We must become a fortress, not a target. Old John stood up, nodding in agreement. Wise, my lord. We must stabilize our roots, Vic added, echoing the sentiment that tall trees catch the wind. The council agreed. I then shifted to my second decision. Population is our present, but children are our future. Knowledge is the spark of destiny. I am establishing an enlightenment hall for all children under 12. The council was stunned. In this world, education was a luxury reserved for the elite. Old Hardy stood, bowing deeply. Merciful. You are a truly merciful lord. Ulu slapped his forehead, realizing why I had asked for the census. He pulled out a crumpled paper. My lord, the count is complete. 121 children in total, 73 boys and 48 girls, aged 3 to 12. I turned to Scholar Alva, who stiffened. Master Glenn chuckled. Looks like you're the new babysitter, old man. Alva flushed but bowed to me, accepting the duty. I instructed old John to assist with the building and Esther to procure supplies, leaving the curriculum to the scholar. The meeting concluded, and the officials departed. Only I, Lynn Aurora, and old John remained. Seeing old John hesitating, I prompted him. What is it, old John? The old man glanced at me and then pointedly at Lynn Aurora's stomach. Lynn and I froze, both realizing the implication. Lynn blushed and looked down. Old John stroked his beard with a grin. The territory is on track, but an heir is vital for the Pendragon family's future and the stability of the realm. Before they could react, the old man scurried out with surprising speed. He vanished from the room. I sighed, turning to Lynn. Seeing her shy, trembling state, my annoyance turned to tenderness. I pulled her into my arms, resting my chin on her silver hair. That old man, he's getting more shameless. Don't mind him. Lynn buried her face in my chest, feeling my warm, steady heartbeat. Feeling slightly less embarrassed, she gripped my lapel tightly and muttered, Lord John, you're right. Meanwhile, in the distant Thorn City, Sir Lucius sat behind his cold obsidian desk. Opposite him, Marquis Marcus held a letter, his rugged face beaming. Ha! Look at this, Sir Lucius. That Medici brat, Salota, actually took Runestone City. Though smaller than Lucerne City, he's fast. He's clearly challenging me for control of the southern west. Interesting. Lucius remained expressionless, silently handing Marcus another letter. This envelope bore an elegant crest, a nimble fish circling a silver moon. Marcus took it and scanned it quickly. Seconds later, his brows shot up, his surprise far greater than before. Well, Camilla Russell, that girl from the east? She's fast too. She reclaimed a city? Maple Leaf City? How are these Federation remnants so weak, falling one after another to these kids? He looked at Lucius, suggesting, Sir, it seems these remnants are nothing. Why wait for the Duke's reinforcements? Let's send troops and wipe out the remaining strongholds now. Lucius finally looked up, his voice calm and devoid of emotion. They are merely insignificant pawns. Pawns? Marcus asked, confused. Then, sir, since Salota and Camilla took cities, what do we do? Grant them baron titles like me. Won't that create the problem you warned about? 3 new barons emerging at once. A rare, mocking smile touched Lucius's cold face. Grant them, he said clearly, and do it grandly. Let the entire West and the royal capital know. The LaRoche family rewards merit. Baron Salota Medici of Runestone City and Baroness Camilla Russell of Maple Leaf City. Their achievements deserve recognition. Marcus was stunned, his brows furrowed in confusion. Sir, why? Aren't you worried about them growing too powerful? Won't this publicity? He could not grasp Lucius's intent. Was it a trap, or was he inviting chaos? Lucius didn't answer, turning his gaze toward the gray sky of Thorn City. By letting equally ambitious stars rise simultaneously, they would illuminate and constrain one another. When their lights collided, the true master could remain in control. This was the ideal outcome. Days later, fueled by Lucius's subtle maneuvering, ripples spread through the nobility in the royal capital Orlandia. Did you hear? 2 more barons from the Reclamation. Salota Medici, the Southern Duke's son, and Camilla Russell from the east. Heavens! With Eli Black, that's 3 new barons in the west in such a short time. Hush! But, since Duke Federico of the West is now Prime Minister, if one can earn merit there, isn't a title. Rumors and speculation flew through salons and banquets. For decades, titles had been granted sparingly. They required recommendations from dukes and the final approval of the king or prime minister. Now, Duke Federico LaRoche held the position of prime minister. A baron's title no longer seemed out of reach for those who could catch his eye. This idea spread like wildfire, igniting the interest of noble youths who once scoffed at the barren West. Nobles who had been dismissive began re-examining maps, weighing risks and rewards. Ambitious adventurers and mercenary leaders also sensed a chance to change their fates. Roads to the west grew crowded with carriages, private soldiers bearing family crests, and groups of armed opportunists. The western wasteland, once a place of exile, was transformed. Driven by the allure of titles and Lucius's promotion, it became a gold rush of opportunity. Inside the Prime Minister's office, Marquis Toscana, an old guard noble of the West, frowned. He placed a letter stamped with the Western governor's seal on Duke Federico's desk. "My lord," Toscana said, sounding confused and dissatisfied. "I don't understand. Sir Lucius is being too reckless. Runestone City, Maple Leaf City, and Lucerne City. Clearing rebels is fine, but granting 3 baronies so easily? Salota is the Southern Duke's son, and Camilla is backed by the East. Aren't we letting outsiders take root and steal the glory and benefits meant for our Western nobles?" As a long-standing Western noble, he instinctively rejected these outsiders who gained equal status through a single battle, fearing they would erode the local power base. Duke Federico set aside a secret memo regarding Eastern grain shipments and looked up with eyes like deep wells. He did not answer directly. "Toscana," the Duke said steadily. "Kingdom law rewards merit. They reclaimed land and drove out the enemy. It is a genuine achievement. It must be rewarded. Besides," Federico smiled faintly, "you must look further. Peace is never stagnant. It requires balance and compromise. And now, Duke Russell can no longer stall the grain shipment orders." Toscana, not a fool, realized the Prime Minister and Sir Lucius were playing a grand game. He bowed respectfully. "My lord's foresight is profound. I was dull. This was far better than letting one family dominate or forcing local factions into open conflict." "Indeed," Federico nodded. Toscana hesitated before asking another burning question. "My lord, how did your talk with Marquis Leon go? Has he relented?" Federico kept his eyes on his documents, his lips curling into a mysterious smile. "How it went is unimportant." He looked at the confused Toscana. "What matters is that he talked to me." Once the Black family of the royal territory stepped into the Western Prime Minister's office, the initiative had already shifted. It was a signal, a posture. The rest was merely a matter of time, leverage, and patience. Toscana nodded thoughtfully, asking no more. In the warm south, the Duke's garden was filled with the scent of flowers. Duke Harkson Medici, a tall, imposing man, listened to his butler's report. Young Master Salota successfully reclaimed Runestone City and has been officially named Baron of Runestone City by Sir Lucius. The butler smiled. Duke Harkson finally looked satisfied and nodded. "Good. He hasn't failed the family and has regained some face." Salota's quick victory and title proved his capability and washed away previous humiliations. It seems the Golden Knight and those 200 elites were not wasted. A similar scene unfolded in the artistic East. In the study of the Russell estate, the atmosphere was light. The Eastern Duke, a refined man, read his daughter Camilla's letter with a proud smile. "Baroness of Maple Leaf City. Good, very good. As expected of my daughter." I set down the letter and smiled at the family knight commander. "Pass the order. Send Camilla another batch of fine weapons, armor, and her favorite Eastern Territory steeds. Tell her to perform well in the West and not shame the East." Obsidian Territory, Lord's fortress study. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the documents and maps piled on the desk. I had just finished a report on the new recruit training when Esther hurried in. "My lord, the latest news from Thorn City," Esther said in a low voice. "Sabuda Medici has reclaimed Runestone City and was officially enfeoffed as Baron of Runestone City by Sir Lucius. Camilla Russell, daughter of the Eastern Duke, was also ennobled for taking Maple Leaf City." I paused with my quill, looking up with an amused smile rather than concern. "Oh, Baron Sabuda Medici, interesting. Ennobled? But..." I raised an eyebrow. "His Shadow Valley territory is deeper in the Night Song Forest than Obsidian Territory. The beast tide should have hit him harder. How did he hold them off and still have the strength to siege a city?" The answer was obvious. It seems the Southern Duke's support is far greater than we imagined. But this move by Sir Lucius, I muttered, my smile deepening. The timing is perfect. Sabuda and Camilla being ennobled draws the attention of the royal capital and other factions. It buys obsidian territory and Lucerne City precious breathing room. But the real brilliance is the balance of power, making us all targets for one another. I could imagine Sabuda gritting his teeth, aiming his hostility directly at me. Lucius had easily redirected Sabuda's anger and competitive pressure onto me with a new title. Sabuda will definitely target us now, I told Esther. Pass the order. Continue the low-profile development in Lucerne and Obsidian. Reinforce walls, train soldiers, stockpile supplies, and integrate the population. The noisier it gets outside, the calmer we must remain. Quiet growth is the only way. I thought of Sir Lucius's emotionless eyes. Truly terrifying, sir. You're making a loyal subject of the West feel quite cold. I sensed that Lucius would be both a stepping stone and my greatest obstacle. Runestone City, a smaller stone fortress in the southern west, now flew the Medici banner of snakes and coins. The streets were quiet, scarred by battle, as soldiers cleared debris. Inside the Lord's Hall, Sabuda sat at the head of the table, flanked by his core members, led by gold-tier knight Calvin Medici. Also present were his trusted commanders, Luke, Ragnar, and Queso. Days earlier, outside Runestone City, Sabuda reined in his horse. His cold, delicate face was set. Behind him were 400 soldiers, a mix of battle-hardened survivors from Shadow Valley and elite reinforcements. Most striking was the Iron Tower figure beside him, Calvin Medici. Gold-tier battle chi flowed around him like invisible flames, exerting heavy pressure. As Sabuda's uncle, he was the true anchor of this operation. Runestone City's garrison was exhausted and demoralized from the beast tide. Sabuda decided to gamble his territory. He signaled Calvin, who nodded slightly. Luke, Queso, Sabuda commanded. Take 200 men to the east wall. Attack hard. Make noise. But you are only allowed to lose, not win. Lure them out. Understand. Understood. Soon, war cries shattered the night. Luke and Queso's 200 soldiers surged toward the east wall like a flood. Arrows rained down as ladders were raised. Soldiers climbed, screaming amidst the clash of steel. Enemy attack. The garrison was stunned, then launched a frantic counterattack. Logs and stones crushed the attackers. Luke roared, but the assault visibly weakened. His men panicked and retreated in disarray, appearing to abandon their armor. Trash. A burly officer from the former Ursus Federation roared from the wall. Is that all you've got? Brothers, kill them all. The heavy gate groaned open. The garrison charged out like tigers, eager to slaughter the retreating cowards. Luke and Queso fled in terror, drawing the garrison deep into the wilderness. A low, piercing horn blast echoed. Boom! A mountain-like pressure erupted from the darkness. Calvin Medici leaped from behind a hill, his heavy greatsword screaming through the air toward the Ursus officer. The officer's pride turned to despair. He couldn't even raise his shield. Splat! The greatsword cleaved through man, armor, and horse, turning them into a bloody mist. Kill! Sabuda led the remaining 200 fresh troops. They struck the confused garrison's flank like sharp blades. It was a slaughter. Without leadership, the garrison were lambs before a gold-tier knight and a pincer attack. Resistance collapsed. Fleeing soldiers were hunted down. The wilderness was left with hundreds of corpses, and Runestone City had a new master. Luke stood to break the silence. My lord, the remaining garrison is cleared. The populace is stable after we distributed captured grain. Sabuda nodded. Runestone City and our original territory hold 1,500 people, the foundation of our future in the West. Settle them well. Allow no errors. Luke, you oversee this with Ragnar's help. They agreed. Ragnar added, we've tallied the loot, 1,220 gold coins. The granaries, plus our supplies from Shadow Valley and dried meat from the beast tide, will last 3 months. The tension in the hall broke, and the commanders smiled with relief. In the desolate west, nothing stabilized hearts like food. Even Sabuda's gloomy face showed a genuine smile. He turned to Calvin Medici, his tone filled with rare respect and gratitude. Uncle, capturing Runestone City and turning the tide is all thanks to your decisive leadership. I will never forget this contribution. Calvin Medici's stern face softened slightly as he nodded. It was my duty. You performed well, Sabuda, decisive and ruthless. You have lived up to the Duke's expectations. His validation dispelled the lingering gloom Sabuda felt over the heavy casualties. Suddenly, Queso stood up, his voice urgent and fanatical. Baron, with Lord Calvin's prowess, our morale is at its peak. Why not strike while the iron is hot and march on my lair, the Obsidian Territory? Scouts report my place is protected only by low wooden fences, and surely they suffered from the beast tide as well. With Lord Calvin's gold-tier strength and our elite forces, we can crush the Obsidian Territory and wash away our shame. His proposal stirred the radical generals, who immediately voiced their support. Yes, destroy that arrogant brat. However, Ragnar stood up. I object. Queso, victory has clouded your judgment. He looked at the generals before turning to Sabuda. Baron, we just finished a brutal battle. The Shadow Valley campaign was costly, and taking Runestone City cost us nearly 100 men. The soldiers are exhausted and need rest. Runestone City is newly occupied. The people are unsettled, defenses are broken, and supplies are disorganized. A rash expedition against an unknown eye is too risky. If our rear is unstable or we face stiff resistance, the consequences will be disastrous. The hall fell silent. Sabuda weighed the options and eventually nodded. Ragnar is right. We need to stabilize our foundation. Blind aggression will only squander our hard-won gains. He looked at Queso. We will follow Ragnar's advice. Control your temper, Queso. Queso flushed, glared at Ragnar, and muttered, Yes, my lord. Sabuda stood, regained his composed smile, and clapped. Enough. Everyone has worked hard. Tonight, we hold a celebration banquet in this hall. Wine and roasted meat for all. To the victory of Runestone City. Long live the Baron. Cheers. The hall erupted in deafening cheers. Fatigue was replaced by excitement as the generals set aside their disputes. Meanwhile, in the Obsidian Territory, I sat in my study. By candlelight, I read reports from Griffin and Amelia regarding the reconstruction of my territories following the beast tide. They detailed repairs to homes and defenses, land reclamation, and expressed gratitude for my management strategies. I nodded in approval and began drafting replies, advising them to prioritize food production and local industry. I also suggested strengthening militia training and calling for support if needed. Just as I turned to write to Hans, the candle flickered and died. In the sudden darkness, Lynn Aurora stood by my desk, her silhouette outlined by moonlight. Her purple eyes sparkled with a mix of playfulness and tenderness. It's late, she said softly. Time to rest. I smiled helplessly and followed her as she led me toward the bedroom, muttering to myself about old John. A new day began with the daily routine. A pale blue light screen unfolded in my mind, marked by a deep purple beam. Purple, Runestone City falls. Sabuda Medici used a feigned retreat to lure out the main force, allowing gold-tier knight Calvin Medici to ambush and behead the commander, seizing the city with minimal losses. I tapped my desk, unsurprised. As I thought, I confirmed the Southern Duke's reinforcements were significant. This was the most efficient way to take a weak point. With Runestone City as a base and depleted forces, they will lie low for a while. They need to digest the population and fortify defenses. They won't attack the Black Territories soon. The confirmation eased my nerves. My thoughts shifted to another long-standing purple intelligence entry. Purple. Deep within the forgotten rift of the western border lies the secret tomb of Iron Arm Balder. Balder was a legendary founder of the ancient city-state alliance. His tomb likely held immense wealth, lost martial arts, and secrets of the land. Previously, I lacked the strength to pursue it. But now, looking at the growing walls of my territory and hearing the soldiers training, I felt ready. The beast tide had forged veterans, the population had surged, and food stores were ample. It is time. I decided to schedule the exploration. I calculated my resources, 350 veteran soldiers, 40 Black Raven Knights under Buck, and the capacity to recruit 200 more. This will fill the defense gaps in Lucerne City and the Obsidian Territory while preparing for the next move. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Young master, it was Esther. Come in. She entered, looking conflicted. My lord, Steward Sebastian has returned. Oh, the steward is back. I was delighted. With him, the chances of successfully exploring the tomb increased. He didn't come alone. Esther added, looking puzzled. He brought a very unique lady. And a mouse? That noisy marmot from before. A lady? Gulu. I stood up abruptly. Where are they? Sebastian took them to the council hall. I rushed out. I burst through the heavy doors of the council hall, my breath hitching. The fireplace crackled in the hall. Sebastian stood silently in the shadows, his expression as stoic as ever. Sitting elegantly in my chair was Queen Irene, her face altered to look plain and delicate. She wore a simple light blue robe, her silver hair loose. Her starry eyes remained calm. On the oak table, Gulu the marmot stood on its hind legs, hands on its hips, looking arrogant. The great princess and Lord Gulu have graced your loyal obsidian territory. Gulu squeaked. Where is the applause? I suppressed my urge to sigh, stepped forward, and bowed deeply. I greet the princess. I ignored the marmot. Irene looked at me calmly, then signaled to Sebastian. The old steward nodded at me, his expression softening slightly, before vanishing into the shadows. I stared at the empty space, then turned back to the chair, feeling utterly helpless. Knight Eli. Irene's ethereal voice broke the silence. Won't you introduce me to your territory? I suppressed my bewilderment at the request from an elf princess and gathered my thoughts. Your Highness, this is Black Territory, the foundation of the Pendragon family. We have nearly 3,000 residents, with industries including farming, mining, smithing, and hunting. Defensively, we are reinforcing our walls, with 350 standing soldiers and 40 elite knights. We built this from nothing in about 3 months. Irene's starry eyes rippled with surprise. She knew humans usually took years to achieve this. She nodded calmly. To start from zero and achieve this in mere months, it is passable. Gulu muttered, Passable? That's amazing. Your standards are too high. Irene ignored the creature. A loud growl erupted from the table, breaking the silence. Gulu rubbed its round belly, looking at me with pitiful black bead eyes. Hey, human. Great Gulu is hungry. I want cheese. Meat. Lots of it. I ignored the marmot and asked Irene why she was here with my steward. Irene covered the marmot's mouth. You may call me Irene. I recently awakened and wanted to see the world. I happened upon your steward. My eyes glinted with a bold idea. Ignoring Gulu's continued protests, I smiled sincerely at Irene. Princess Irene, since you are interested in exploring, would you be interested in archaeology? I have intel on the tomb of the legendary pioneer Iron Arm Balder, hidden in a cave within the Forgotten Rift. Irene listened, her long-dormant curiosity piqued by the prospect of exploring an ancient hero's resting place. She acknowledged that even short-lived human lives could leave brilliant sparks. They often left behind unexpected traces. Hey, are you two listening to me? Gulu shrieked, furious at being ignored. It lunged at me, digging its claws into my hair. You wretched human, how dare you ignore the great Gulu? I shouted in shock, trying to pry the creature off. The solemn council chamber descended into chaos with my shouting and Gulu's screeching. Irene watched the scene, observing the usually composed, shrewd white-haired lord. I was currently in a frantic struggle with the marmot, my composure completely shattered. A faint smile, like melting spring ice, bloomed in her eyes. I noticed the fleeting smile and felt a surge of excitement despite my disheveled hair. With this unfathomable elf princess joining, the success of the expedition to Balder's tomb was all but guaranteed. It is an honor to have you, princess, I said, stuffing the marmot into my pocket. I shall prepare immediately for tomorrow morning. No need, Irene interrupted, looking out the window. I dislike crowds. The 3 of us will suffice. I frowned, wanting to argue for backup like Buck or the Black Raven Knights. But meeting Irene's calm gaze, my words died in my throat. As you wish, princess. I sighed. What of the artifacts we find? Irene looked at me as if the question were redundant. Do you not know simple spatial storage magic? I felt a metaphorical arrow pierce my chest. I do not. Irene realized she had overestimated this human's capabilities. She remained silent, her expression implying I was useless. The next morning, at dawn, after saying goodbye to Lynn Aurora and leaving affairs to old John and Esther, I arrived at the valley entrance with 2 pack horses. Irene was waiting, with Gulu dozing on her shoulder. Old John asked worriedly, Are you really only taking 3? Yes, master, Esther added. At least take Captain Buck or someone else. I waved them off. Follow the plan. If there is an emergency, use a raven to contact Brandon in Lucerne City. I mounted my horse. Princess, please. Irene gracefully mounted hers. Gulu grumbled, finding a comfortable spot on her shoulder. The three rode toward the Forgotten Rift. As they neared the border, the scars of war became visible, scorched fields and overgrown weeds. Vines crawled over collapsed stone walls, a shocking testament to the conflict. Irene scanned the ravaged land with confusion and pity. Why are humans so obsessed with brutal greed? They could have lived in harmony on this land. Gula chimed in, exactly. Humans are the worst. They bring only destruction. They cut down ancient trees and drive away forest dwellers just to build ugly, cold stone houses. I listened to their accusations, feeling a complex mix of emotions. I wanted to explain that war had roots and greed stemmed from survival, but the ruins made my words feel hollow. I sighed, looking at the horizon. Perhaps, even in darkness and chaos, there is still truth and hope. I realized that while Irene was powerful, her heart was like unblemished crystal. She could not comprehend the human struggle for survival. Perhaps this innocence was why the elves were betrayed and driven into hiding. Irene did not answer, her gaze deepening with pity. By noon, a winding stream appeared ahead. The babbling brook brought a refreshing vitality to their dull journey under the sunlight. I dismounted, suggesting a rest to water the horses. Irene agreed. Gulu, spotting fish, grew ecstatic at the prospect of a meal beyond dry rations. I offered to catch some, and Irene sat on a flat rock by the water. Gulu scampered after me toward a calm bend in the stream. The water was crystal clear, revealing smooth pebbles and swaying weeds below. Perhaps due to the remote location, the fish swam lazily, unafraid of human presence. I waded into the cool water, focused on a plump trout. As it flicked its tail, I struck with lightning speed. With a splash, I hauled a forearm-length trout from the water. Gula cheered as I tossed the fish onto the grass. I quickly caught 4 more, while Gula managed to stun a smaller one with its paw. Gulu proudly presented its small catch to Irene, placing it at her feet. Irene looked at the struggling fish and the 5 larger ones on the bank. We can't eat all this. Let's release them, she suggested. I, mid-gutting a fish, paused and sighed inwardly. Seeing the contrast between the large fish and Irene's small, pathetic one, I conceded. Her compassion reminded me of Taoist philosophy from my past life. I returned 2 of the smaller trout to the stream. The fish swam away. I left Gulu's small fish alone to preserve the creature's pride. I cleaned the remaining 2, skewered them on sharpened branches, and started a fire. Fat dripped onto the coals, filling the air with a savory, charred aroma. Gulu abandoned its small fish, staring intently at the roasting trout. Drool pooled on the grass beneath the creature. So fragrant. I'm starving, Gulu whimpered. I retrieved a pouch of coarse salt and dried herbs. I seasoned the fish and offered the first one to Irene. When she hesitated, I offered to Deb one it, but she declined and tore off a piece herself. I gave the second fish to Gulu. Gulu shrieked with excitement, clutching the branch and taking a massive bite. Hot. So delicious. Gulu hopped around, unable to stop eating despite the heat. Irene watched Gulu's gluttony before looking at her own piece of white fish meat. She took a bite. The texture was tender, hot, and intensely flavorful. It was a stark, vibrant contrast to the bland, natural diet of the elves. Her eyes lit up. She immediately tore off another large piece. Filler omitted. The trio continued west along the winding stream through the desolate wilderness. The landscape was a monotonous expanse of gray and yellow. Gulu dozed on Irene's shoulder as the sun began to set, casting long shadows. They approached a low ridge. As they reached the top, the sound of chaotic hoofbeats erupted from behind the ridge. A dozen riders emerged, surrounding them. I pulled my horse back, shielding Irene. Gulu woke in terror. The riders were ragtag, wearing worn leather armor. The leader, a fierce-looking officer, eyed them like a viper. His gaze turned lecherous as he stared at Irene. The scarred officer signaled his men to halt. Stop. Which Federation trash are you? Don't you know Storm City is Wanlu territory? His men laughed, leering at Irene. The officer mocked me, inviting Irene to join them in Storm City instead. My gaze turned icy. I assessed the group. They were weak, with the officer only at Black Iron high tier. I prepared to strike. In a blur, I drew 3 black arrows from my quiver. I pulled my bow taut and released them in a single, fluid motion. The arrows struck with precision, piercing the throats of the officer and his 2 loudest subordinates. The officer collapsed like a rotting log, followed by the others. The remaining riders were stunned, then erupted in rage. They drew their weapons and charged at me. I reached for my silver sword, ready to fight, when I heard a soft, helpless sigh behind me. Irene looked at me, a ripple of emotion in her calm eyes. She flicked her slender finger toward the charging riders. The ground beneath the riders suddenly split open. Screams of terror replaced their war cries as thick vines erupted from the earth with irresistible force. Vines surged like lightning, entangling the cavalry's limbs and horses. The steeds collapsed with pained cries, throwing their riders to the ground. Airborne knights were caught midair, the vines tightening until bones shattered and flesh tore with sickening wet thuds. Silence returned within a few breaths. The dozen fierce cavalrymen and their horses were reduced to mangled heaps of gore. I froze, my hand on my sword, silver. My own horse panicked at the carnage. I looked back at Irene, stunned. I knew she was powerful, but not that she could be this effortlessly, cruelly efficient. Though kind and averse to needless killing, she would not ignore threats or insults. Let's go. Irene's voice remained calm. I sheathed silver, and we rode on. By the next afternoon, a massive city appeared on the horizon, larger than Thorn City or even the royal capital Orlandia, looming like an ancient dragon. I wondered how the Federation had breached such walls. Gulu stood on Irene's shoulder, shielding its eyes. So high? Almost as tall as Lord Gulu. My mouth twitched at the comparison. Irene studied the walls, a flicker of realization in her eyes. These walls aren't just stone. They contain ancient, resilient elven earth protection magic. Elven magic? I immediately thought of Roderick LaRoche, the traitor to the Elven Queen. Was Storm City a relic of that era? A remnant of brief elven-human cooperation? The oppressive aura grew as they approached. Go around. Infiltrate, I asked, knowing a direct assault was suicide. Without a word, Irene waved her hand. A ripple of space enveloped them. I felt a jolt of weightlessness. When I landed, I was standing on the other side of the towering wall. They had bypassed Storm City silently. I stared back at the wall, struggling to comprehend the impossibility of what just happened. I wisely kept my questions to myself. Some things about the powerful were better left unasked. Without her, even the Black Raven Knights would have been helpless here. Your Highness, that creature in the Night Song Forest Lake. Was it a dragon? Irene smiled slightly at my curiosity. Yes, but Valerian has weak dragon blood, and at 200 years old, he is still a child. My expression froze. I swallowed my retort, sighing in defeat. Compared to elves and dragons, I was barely an embryo. They continued through rugged terrain for another day until the earth split open before them. A colossal canyon stretched across the horizon, the Forgotten Rift. The cliffs were vertical and dizzyingly high, vanishing into the clouds. The abyss was bottomless, filled with gray mist and howling winds that sounded like ghosts. Spectacular, I murmured, feeling insignificant. Gula hopped down to the edge. It peered cautiously into the mist. The cold wind ruffled its fur, making it shiver and retreat. Determined to save face, Gulu puffed out its chest. It let out a piercing, signature shriek into the void. H-H-H-H-H-H-H. The sound echoed off the cliffs, amplified until it drowned out the wind. I rubbed my ringing ears, while Irene remained stoic. I glared at the smug marmot. The wind whipped sand against the frozen rock walls. I looked down the cliff toward the entrance mentioned by the information system. Irene reached out, and with a surge of power, they were instantly transported to the dark, solid floor of the rift. Gulu shrieked and dove into my hair. Dark. Too dark. I don't want the treasure anymore. I winced as the marmot tugged my hair. I stuffed the noisy creature into my pocket. Shut up, or I'll feed you to the bats. I listened. There was only the sound of cold wind from the cave. I checked with Irene, who sensed no immediate threats. I lit a torch, revealing a narrow, winding tunnel. Gulu poked its head out, complaining about the lack of light. I ignored it. leading the way into the tunnel with Irene following closely. The air grew colder, and the wind made the torchlight dance wildly. I stayed alert, watching for traps or predators. After half an hour, I stopped. The path ahead was blocked by thick, layered webs. The webs were littered with dried bones and insect husks. I frowned. I stepped closer, hit by a pungent, foul stench emanating from the dense, opaque webbing. Archaeology or grave robbing? I muttered, recalling tomb-raiding tropes. Gulu poked his head out, eyes wide. Eli, burn that web. I touched my torch to the thick, sticky silk. It curled and vanished into ash, revealing deeper darkness. After much effort, the final layer of webbing burned away, clearing the path ahead. I exhaled, raising my torch to press forward. The moment I stepped forward, asterisk whoosh, asterisk a foul-smelling, powerful gust of wind erupted. It surged from the depths of the tunnel, instantly extinguishing my torch. Absolute darkness swallowed them. Gulu let out a piercing, heart-wrenching scream that echoed through the narrow cave. My heart sank. The classic, light goes out, danger strikes, horror trope played out in my mind. Instinct taking over, I drew silver. The cold blade hummed in my hand, my muscles coiled. A final flicker of the dying torch gave me a split-second glimpse of the horror. My pupils constricted. It wasn't just wind. A massive, terrifying silhouette lurked in the shadows. A spider. Its body blocked the tunnel, covered in needle-like black bristles. 8 crimson eyes glowed with cold malice. Enraged by the fire, it spread its thick, hook-tipped legs. Like a bolt of black lightning, it lunged at me. Death wish. I didn't retreat. As the hooked limb neared my face, I slid and ducked. The razor-sharp leg grazed my scalp, the wind of its passage stinging my cheek. In a flash, I swung silver, slicing the joint of the spider's rear leg. Green ichor sprayed as the creature shrieked, losing its balance. Enraged, it thrashed, spewing toxic gas and lashing out with its remaining limbs. A spear-like foreleg thrust toward my chest. I arched my back, narrowly dodging both the poison and the strike. As the spider leaned forward from its missed attack, I saw my opening. I lunged, driving silver upward into its soft underbelly. The blade sank deep into the creature's flesh. The spider let out a deafening, earth-shaking shriek, its body convulsing wildly. I gripped the hilt, muscles straining, and used the spider's own thrashing momentum to drag the blade sideways. A meter-long gash tore open across the spider's massive abdomen. Viscera and foul fluids poured out. The spider's screech died instantly, its crimson eyes dimming. The carcass collapsed into a pile of slime. Good job, Eli, Gula cheered, patting my armor. I ignored the rodent, turning to Queen Irene with a sigh. Your Highness, you called this no strong threat. Irene smirked. If you could handle it, it wasn't a threat, was it? I sighed, relighting my torch to banish the darkness. They moved forward until the tunnel opened into a vast cavern. In the center lay a clear pool surrounded by strange flora. Huh, these plants. I noted. I planned to collect samples for Scholar Alva. As I reached for a flower with golden bells, Irene spoke. Golden bell, paralytic poison. Turbid grass, causes permanent muteness if overdosed. Fuyang vine, an aphrodisiac. I froze, my hand hovering in midair. Ignoring my embarrassment, Irene looked at the pool. The real treasure isn't on land. It's in the water. I looked at the clear, empty-looking pool. The water was shallow, revealing only smooth pebbles at the bottom. Irene turned her gaze toward Gulu. Gulu, the marmot stiffened. Yes, Your Highness. Go down and retrieve the box at the bottom. Her tone was as casual as asking for a stone. What? In the water? Gulu's fur stood on end. No, Gula hates water. There might be man-eating fish. How can a great bear like me? Irene hummed softly. Gulu immediately puffed out his chest, jumped into the pool with a splash, and dove. Minutes later, the water churned. Gulu surfaced, shivering and clutching a box, his teeth chattering uncontrollably. I took the box, my heart racing. Baldur's Legacy? It felt cold and heavy, like jade with a metallic weight. I tried to pry it open, but it wouldn't budge. I searched for a latch or seam, but the surface was seamless. Irene touched the lid, frowned, and shook her head. It's sealed by an ancient, unique method. Keep it safe. It won't open. Gulu shrieked. He pointed at the box, outraged. Your Highness, you made the great Gulu soak in freezing water, just for a broken box that won't open? This is animal abuse. I frowned, feeling a wave of disappointment. Something was wrong. Was this all? I scanned the empty cavern, finding only cold rock. Was the intelligence wrong? Was Baldur's tomb not here? I refused to give up, checking the walls. I felt every inch of the wet stone, searching for hidden mechanisms. I'm furious, Gulu yelled, kicking a pebble in frustration. The pebble bounced and struck a small, inconspicuous stone by the pool. Click! A faint mechanical sound echoed through the hall. The three of them froze. A thunderous roar erupted from the center of the pool, accompanied by a powerful suction force. The water drained rapidly, revealing a muddy bottom with a 2-meter-wide black hole at its center. A spiral stone staircase led downward. Gulu, the marmot, puffed out its chest and proudly declared it had triggered the mechanism on purpose. See, I knew the mechanism was here. That kick was intentional to open the secret passage. Impressed? You should thank the great Gulu. I twitched, staring at the bottomless pit. Coincidence? Or is this marmot just lucky? Irene broke the silence and headed toward the entrance. I sighed, stowed the locked box, lit a torch, and descended the slippery, steep stairs. The descent was long, causing a noticeable change in air pressure, until we finally reached a solid, open space. I raised my torch, its orange light struggling to pierce the heavy darkness. Even my resilient mind couldn't help but gasp in shock. We stood in an unimaginably vast underground chamber filled with tens of thousands of clay soldiers arranged in neat phalanxes. The life-size figures held clay weapons, spears, swords, and shields, in various combat stances. Gulu peeked from my pocket, trembling. So many mudmen. Will they come to life? Irene scanned the silent legion, tilting her head to analyze their style. This is indeed the style of an early Western Federation high noble's tomb, she noted. They used these figures to symbolize the tomb owner's power and their command over a ghostly army in the afterlife. I thought of the Terracotta Army. This was the fantasy equivalent of the Qin Mausoleum Palace. At the center stood a heavy, square palace made of obsidian. Irene led the way, and I followed, gripping my silver sword as we navigated through the rows of statues. Suddenly, Gulu let out a piercing shriek, frantically slapping me. They moved. Eli, look behind us. The mud men blocked the path. I spun around to see the path we had just walked sealed off by silent, shifting statues. Terrified, I urged Irene to retreat, but she remained calm. With me here, what is there to fear? She asked, walking toward the obsidian palace. I reluctantly followed. The massive stone doors were carved with intricate, mysterious patterns telling a forgotten tale. I pushed the doors open, releasing a wave of ancient, decaying air. Inside, the space was smaller than expected, dominated by a plain obsidian sarcophagus and a tall black stele covered in tadpole-like script. I scanned the room, my instincts on high alert. I expected a deadly tomb guardian to emerge. Yet, the palace remained eerily empty. Irene walked straight to the stele, captivated by the text. I, seeing no immediate threat, approached and asked what it said. Irene read the ancient script aloud in the hollow chamber. It's a story of a quest for immortality. Baldur, the iron-armed monarch, believed that balancing yin and yang was the secret to eternal life. He spent his life collecting companions, humans, elves, orcs, demi-humans, and even mermen. He sought to fuse the life essences of different races to transcend the boundaries of life and death. I was stunned by the monarch's bizarre logic. Did he fail? I asked. Irene shook her head, tracing the text. No, he succeeded in gaining power and longevity. But he was unfaithful, inciting the wrath of all his companions. On a full moon, they conspired and stabbed him to death in his bedchamber. I gasped, shocked by such a ridiculous yet logical demise. It was a classic tragedy of a powerful man undone by his own harem. I glanced at the obsidian sarcophagus, feeling a mix of irony and pity. Just as I approached the coffin, a thunderous boom echoed. A heavy, mountain-collapsing sound shook the room. The massive obsidian doors slammed shut on their own. Then, a hiss filled the air. A strange, pinkish-white gas began to pour into the chamber. I coughed, my instincts screaming of a trap. I held my breath and channeled my battle chi, preparing for the worst. I looked to Irene, expecting her to handle the threat. But when I saw her face, my blood turned to ice. Irene, usually calm and composed, wore a look of pure, unadulterated horror. Her starry eyes were filled with disbelief and a frantic panic I had never seen before. My magic. I can't channel it. I can't channel my magic. Her voice, laced with shock, sent a chill down my spine. Losing her magic meant losing our greatest protection. My mind went blank, but survival instinct took over. Hold your breath. I roared, drawing my silver sword. I slashed my blade, tearing a piece of clean linen from my leather armor lining. I shoved a sweat-stained cloth into Irene's hands. Cover your nose and mouth. Irene obeyed, pressing the rough fabric to her face as I turned toward the massive obsidian door that had just slammed shut. With a low roar, I unleashed my battle chi, my muscles bulging like solid rock as I slammed my palms against the heavy, frigid door. Open. I pushed with every ounce of strength, veins bulging on my forehead, but the door remained immovable. Frustrated, I began slamming my shoulder against it repeatedly. It's useless. That's the obsidian dragon breaking stone. Once it drops, no human force can open it. Irene's voice, muffled by the cloth, was weak and bitter. My heart sank. I scanned the chamber for any escape, but found nothing save for a massive, cold obsidian sarcophagus. Time was running out. Damn it, I cursed, then grabbed Irene and hoisted her into my arms. I fished Gulu, who was trembling in my pocket, and shoved the creature into my chest armor. I sprinted to the sarcophagus, channeled my remaining strength into my right leg, and kicked the gap between the lid and the base. Open for me. With a dull boom, the heavy lid slid back just enough to allow a person to squeeze inside. Get in. I shoved Irene into the narrow opening like a sack. I squeezed in after her, using my shoulder to brace the lid. With a final surge of effort, I shoved the lid back into place. It wasn't airtight, but it blocked the worst of the toxic gas. The interior plunged into suffocating darkness. Ha. I leaned against the cold wall, gasping for air. Exhausted, I collapsed. Irene, recovering from the shock, moved to the other side of the sarcophagus. Your Highness, I rasped. Is the gas concentration lower here? Can you channel magic? After a silence, Irene sighed in frustration. No, the sarcophagus acts as a smaller anti-magic field. My magic is still suppressed. Hope vanished. I felt my vision darken. I slid down the wall, collapsing to the bottom of the sarcophagus. It was over. I couldn't die here. Not with the Black Territory just starting, Lucerne City waiting, and Lynn Aurora counting on me. Regret gnawed at me, but my body was failing. Gulu crawled out from my armor, whimpering. Lord Gulu, we're going to die. The elves' future. Gone. All because of you. You damn human. Irene's breathing hitched. A moment later, she sobbed. I'm sorry, it's my fault. I dragged you into this. The proud elf princess wept openly for the first time. My consciousness began to fray. I squinted through the sliver of light from the lid to see the interior. There were no decaying corpses. The floor was paved with thick gold bricks, and atop them sat a bed made of warm white jade, draped in dark red velvet. Gold, clay statues, and a jade bed. A fitting tomb, I thought with a bitter, self-deprecating smile. I crawled toward the jade bed, using my last bit of strength to roll onto it. Better to die in comfort. As my body touched the jade, something happened. Hiss! A surge of thick, pinkish-white gas erupted from the base of the bed. Ugh! A wave of intense dizziness hit me. I lost consciousness instantly. Beside me, Irene let out a muffled groan before collapsing as well. Warmth. I woke up in a wooden house, lying on a soft, heated brick bed. I was wearing clean, coarse linen clothes. The room was simple but tidy. A woman in a plain dress entered, carrying a steaming bowl of porridge. She looked like Irene, yet her aura was entirely different, warm and grounded. Awake. She touched my forehead, her eyes filled with love. Memories flooded my mind, not of the Black Territory or the tomb, but of this village and this woman, Irene. They were childhood sweethearts, promised to each other by their parents, eventually married, living a simple, happy life. The memories were vivid and absolute. I felt a strange sense of belonging. Drink up, she smiled. They lived a quiet life, working the fields and sharing simple meals. At night, they huddled together, whispering about the future. Soon, a son was born, followed by a daughter 2 years later. I became a father, working hard to provide, while Irene watched with gentle happiness. Life was peaceful, watching their children grow from toddlers to adults. Time slipped away, leaving wrinkles on their faces. They supported each other through every season of life. The growth of their children, the passing of their parents, and the joys and sorrows of the village. Finally, on a quiet night, I held Irene's wrinkled hand as they both drifted into their final sleep. A suffocating sensation yanked me back to reality. I opened my eyes to the cold, dark sarcophagus. But that century of life, the love, the warmth, felt as real as if it had just happened. In the dark, Irene's eyes opened as well. Her gaze was filled with the same shock and the same profound, soul-searing emotion from their shared, phantom lifetime. The elf had never experienced such raw, mortal love. Locked in absolute darkness and facing death, the century-long dream that reshaped their souls collided with reality. Boundaries blurred. Overwhelmed by memories from my past life, I grabbed Irene and pulled her into my arms. Irene stiffened, her star-like eyes widening in the dark, instinctually resisting. It was too late. The weight of a century of shared affection drowned her defenses. When I kissed her, the soul mark of Irene triggered a visceral response. The familiar touch ignited her frozen heart. She didn't push me away. Instead, she clung to me, responding with desperate, clumsy passion. I pulled her closer, carrying her to the white jade bed. Irene's eyes snapped open, the lingering attachment vanishing instantly. It was replaced by intense shame and fury. She felt the weight of another body and the chaotic, agonizing memories of their shared dream. "Get out," she hissed through gritted teeth. I jolted, snapping out of the haze of exhaustion and lingering intimacy. I scrambled off her in a panic. The cramped space was filled with their heavy, suffocating breathing and oppressive silence. My heart raced. I dared not look at her. The madness born of the dream and the clash between their past bond and present reality left me paralyzed with shame. "Queen Irene," I stammered. "This is entirely my fault. I was possessed." "Shut up," she cut him off coldly. She sat up, stiffly adjusting her disheveled robes, her back turned to him. "Mention it again, and I will kill you." I froze, sealing my lips. The silence stretched for an eternity as Irene sat, her fingers trembling on her knees. She closed her eyes, focusing. Moments later, a hum resonated, and her eyes flashed with light. Her magic had returned, likely due to the dissipation of the strange gas. She channeled her energy, green light glowing at her fingertips. Power surged through her. I felt her formidable aura return. I breathed a sigh of relief, though I knew she could crush me like an ant. Irene ignored me. She gestured, and the jade bed and gold bricks dissolved into light. They vanished into a spatial ripple at her fingertip, leaving the sarcophagus empty. Only the obsidian walls and the two of them, plus the unconscious Galu, remained. Irene stood, her back still turned. "Leave." The lid slid open, revealing the palace was clear of the toxic gas. I grabbed the unconscious Galu, tucked him into my coat, and scrambled out, the cold air clearing my head. I looked at the empty sarcophagus and Irene's cold back, my heart heavy with complex emotions. Irene walked toward the center of the palace. I finally understood why Balder had been assassinated by his partners. It was exploitation. Balder used these women as tools for his pursuit of immortality, weaving century-long dreams to manipulate them. Each woman believed she shared a unique, eternal bond with him. When they discovered the truth, that they were merely experiments, the betrayal and rage would be absolute. I shuddered at the thought. I looked at Irene's back, summoning my courage. "Queen Irene, now that your magic is back, shall we leave?" Irene didn't stop or look back. "Shut up. Don't let me hear your voice." I obeyed, following her past the silent clay figurine legion toward the spiral stairs. At the entrance to the underground space, Irene stopped. She raised her hands, gathering massive magical energy. She slammed her hands together. Boom! The earth shook. The entire underground space, including the thousands of clay figures, was obliterated by her power. I turned pale, realizing how dangerously I had been playing with fire. The rumbling subsided after several minutes, leaving only echoes in the abyss. Irene lowered her hands, her power receding. Move. I followed without hesitation. When they teleported to the Emerald Lake in the Night Song Forest, the afternoon sun felt surreal. The past few days felt like a nightmare. Gulu stirred in my arms, but remained unconscious. Irene stood by the lake, her silver hair blowing in the wind, her posture cold and distant. I hesitated. Seeing her rejection, I took a breath and said solemnly, "Queen Irene, I will take responsibility." Before I could finish, the lake erupted. Valerian's massive, scaled head broke the surface, his molten gold eyes locking onto the human. A terrifying dragon aura crushed down on me. Irene's body paused slightly. Without looking back, she snatched the unconscious Gulu from my arms with lightning speed. The force of her movement sent me stumbling. Clutching Gulu, she ignored me and strode toward the lake under Valerian's cold gaze. The water parted into a familiar staircase, and Irene vanished into the shimmering passage. As the lake calmed, I stood alone, feeling a mix of embarrassment, loss, and relief. I pulled a mysterious box from my pack, laughing bitterly at my meager haul from such a perilous journey. Deep within the elven sanctuary, Irene placed the sleeping Gulu in a mossy nest, then stood before a white jade bed, her gaze recoiling as if burned. She instinctively touched her flat stomach, her fingertips trembling. My image and the vivid memories of their 100-year dream flooded her mind. The 2 little lives they had shared were branded onto her soul. A surge of bittersweet warmth overwhelmed her, but she quickly extinguished it, her expression hardening into cold disdain as she turned away. The elven princess lifted her chin, her starry eyes filled with icy pride. She declared to her own wavering heart, "He is merely a human." Back at Obsidian territory, I pushed open the heavy doors of the Lord's fortress. The hall was quiet. When I called for Lynn, Aurora, and Esther, Esther appeared, relieved to see me. I explained that Lynn had left for Lucerne City 2 days ago. "Brandon has urgent documents regarding the new city that require your approval. She went to oversee things herself, taking the guards. She should return soon." I added. "She was very worried and made me promise to send a raven the moment you returned." I felt a warmth in my chest and nodded, promising to send Machio with a message. I asked for a status report. Esther reported, "Old John's wall construction is steady, Hardy's northern fields are thriving, and Vic's pack horses from Thorn City have arrived. Scholar Alva's school is operational, though the children are rowdy. However, trouble has emerged. The patrol caught suspicious scouts near the trade route. Buck suspects they are spies for Sabuda of the Medici family." My eyes sharpened. Sabuda was already overreaching. I summoned Aika. "Take a small, reliable team to Runestone City. Investigate their troop size, defenses, and supplies. Do not engage. Report back immediately." Aika saluted and departed. Buck then appeared at the door. His face was dark with undisguised reproach. "Lord, you finally return after wandering into the Forgotten Rift alone. If you had died, Obsidian territory and Lucerne City would have collapsed without a successor. Why must you always take such risks?" I felt awkward, unable to explain the truth about the elven princess and the trap. I couldn't tell the loyal knight I had been archaeology hunting with a princess who could crush gold-rank warriors, or that they had played out an absurd drama in her tomb. "Captain Buck," I said sincerely, "I was reckless. I promise it won't happen again." Buck scrutinized me before relenting. He then reported that the 200 new recruits were ready. "They are strong, and I have been training them personally." I was pleased, noting that Master Glenn's special swords had been distributed to the Black Raven Knights and the best recruits, boosting morale. However, Sabuda of Runestone City may now possess gold-rank strength. Buck's eyes turned cold. I considered my options, then had a bold idea. I leaned forward. "Captain, what if we invite Sabuda to Obsidian territory for a meeting, claiming we want to name him leader of the Southwest Alliance? And then, during the banquet..." I made a throat-slitting gesture. Buck twitched, his knightly code clearly offended by the ingenious but treacherous plan. "It's a clever idea, though quite despicable. But Sabuda is no fool. He's already wary after our previous run-ins and the capture of his scouts. Do you think he'd walk into your trap?" My excitement cooled instantly. I cleared my head of the confusion caused by Irene and Lynn. "You're right. It was just a flight of fancy. I ordered Buck to increase patrols and focus on defense while waiting for Ika's report. Buck saluted and left. I returned to my desk to handle the paperwork Lin had left behind. I quickly processed the Lucerne City trade proposals, tax exemptions for settlers, and mining requests. As I finished, the room fell silent, the fireplace casting long shadows. I felt a complex ache. How would I face Lin? Suddenly, the door burst open. Lin rushed in, wind-blown and disheveled from her ride back from Lucerne City. She didn't speak, simply rushing forward to wrap her arms tightly around me, burying her face in my neck. I froze, then felt my anxieties and guilt dissolve in her embrace. So be it, I thought, wrapping my arms around her trembling frame. I rested my chin on her soft hair, inhaling the familiar scent of grass and wood. I'm back, I said calmly. Lin Aurora didn't answer, only tightened her embrace. The silent embrace spoke volumes. The Runestone City Hall felt cold. Sabuda Medici sat in the high-backed chair, stroking the obsidian armrests. A messenger wearing the crest of a Western Territory count stood before him, bowing respectfully. So, Sabuda said, his tone playful. The Pendragon Baron of Black Territory has found some incredible treasure in the deep wilderness. The messenger nodded mysteriously. Yes, my master is very concerned. Eli Black's rise is unnatural. We tracked his supplies to Kalen of the North Chamber of Commerce, and after some friendly questioning, Kalen revealed that Baron Pendragon recently purchased 2 large batches of slaves, a total of 1,000 slaves. He also bought enough grain to sustain a large population for months. Sabuda stopped tapping the armrest. 1,000 slaves and massive grain stores. Even after looting Runestone City, such an expense would be ruinous. It would drain his coffers dry. How could Black Territory and Lucerne City, both ravaged by the beast tide, afford this? Mines, Sabuda muttered, frowning. Iron, silver, gold. The legends of hidden wealth in the West were endless. Had that lucky white-haired brat actually struck gold? The thought stung like a viper. Maintaining his composure, he asked, "Why would your master bring such vital intelligence to me?" He emphasized the word master with scrutiny. The messenger offered a fawning smile. Because you are a noble. Medici. The name stung Sabuda. He glared at the messenger. He hated when people attributed his success to his family, as if he were a useless figurehead. He conveniently forgot that without the Golden Knight Calvin and the elite forces sent by the Duke of the South, he would still be licking his wounds in Shadow Valley. I am the Baron of Runestone City. I am Sabuda, he snapped. He emphasized his title, trying to override his birthright. Ragnar, standing behind him, frowned. He knew his lord's obsession well. This desperate need for validation made Sabuda look immature to the wise. Ragnar stayed silent to preserve his lord's dignity, though he felt pity for the messenger, who was now sweating profusely. Yes, Baron Sabuda is wise and powerful, the messenger stammered. He quickly pivoted. My master truly wishes to cooperate. The growth of Black Territory and Lucerne City worries us both. We offer our help. Help? Sabuda sneered. Not for free, I assume. What do you want? The messenger offered his terms. Black Territory would go to Sabuda, Lucerne City to his master, and all resources would be split equally. Sabuda remained unmoved. He asked a practical question. How will you help? Will your count mobilize the border guards? He spoke with disdain. The messenger flushed. That would be treason without orders from Lucius LaRoche or Marquis Marcus Hohenzollern. He regained his composure. But our count is close with Marquis Marcus. We can send 200 elite private soldiers under the guise of bandit suppression. It is a significant force. 200. Sabuda looked at Ragnar for advice. Ragnar shook his head imperceptibly. Refuse, the risk is too high. The cost of a city and half the resources for a mere 200 men was far too steep. Ignoring Ragnar, Sabuda looked at the messenger with a feigned air of consideration. Fine, he said, his tone hardening. But 200 men for a city and half the resources? Your appetite is too large. Tell your master Eli accept the help. I will take the 200 men. However, after we succeed, only Lucerne City goes to your count. Black Territory and everything within it belongs to Runestone City. Splitting resources is out of the question. He shut down any further negotiation and waved his hand. Show him out. The messenger, still stunned, tried to speak. Under Sabuda's cold gaze, he bowed and left. The heavy doors slammed shut. Sabuda, Ragnar stepped forward. Why didn't you refuse? Dealing with greedy old nobles is inviting a wolf into the house. They have ulterior motives, and Lucerne City is a vital strategic point. Sabuda stood and walked to the fireplace, his back to Ragnar. The fire cast flickering shadows on his handsome, feminine face. Refuse, he said calmly. Why? We get 200 extra soldiers, even if only in name. He turned around. Ragnar, look at the scout reports. Black territory is fortifying walls and training soldiers. That cannot be supported by Lucerne City's meager taxes. His eyes darkened. Eli Black found something. Something big. Gold, silver, or something even more valuable. He smirked. We need someone to test the strength of Obsidian territory for us. The Count thinks he's clever? Sabuda walked to Ragnar and brushed his cheek with a fingertip, making the man stiffen. They want to use me as a weapon, Sabuda whispered with snake-like coldness. A mere count is not qualified. Morning light struggled through the thick clouds, casting a stingy glow over black territory. I rubbed my aching lower back and groaned as I climbed out of the large wooden bed in the Lord's fortress. I shook off my lingering fatigue and morning lethargy, my mind instinctively accessing the information system. A deep purple beam flashed. Purple. Count Aldous of the Western Territory has reached a secret pact with Salota Medici. Aldous will send 200 private soldiers under the guise of investigation to support Salota, who has promised to surrender Lucerne City in return. I frowned, fully alert. A Salota backed by a gold-rank knight was already a formidable threat. Now, the Count of the Western Territory was stabbing me in the back. I considered appealing to Sir Lucius, but immediately dismissed it. The Western governor was too inscrutable. Two minor barons bleeding each other dry on the border likely suited the Count's agenda perfectly. Why is it so hard to develop in peace? I muttered, feeling a wave of helplessness. I have to rely on myself. With Aiko away and no intelligence on Salota's troop deployments, I was effectively blind. I forced myself to stay calm, my mind racing to find a way out of the deadlock. Reinforcements? Fortifications? A preemptive strike on Runestone City? I discarded every option as quickly as I conceived them. My new recruits were barely trained. Noland was pressured at Lucerne, and Captain Buck couldn't be in two places at once. Suddenly, Olu, the slave overseer, burst into the study, pale and breathless. My lord, disaster. What is it? I asked, suppressing my irritation. Ulu collapsed to his knees, sobbing. The 17th and 18th slave squads. They're rioting in the residential area. They're in a standoff, and it's about to spiral out of control. I stood up abruptly. Internal strife, while facing external threats? My face darkened. Lead the way. Ulu scrambled up and led me to the east side of the valley. The usually quiet slave quarters were in chaos, with two distinct groups facing off, separated only by a few desperate security team members. Why do you get floor mats, partition rooms, and oil in your porridge? Hark, the chubby leader of the 18th squad, roared at the opposing group. Behind him, the new slaves clamored in indignation. We're all slaves. Why do they get better treatment? It's unfair. We demand a change. The 17th squad's leader, a scarred man known as Scarface, shouted back, his veterans glaring at the newcomers. When we arrived, we lived in drafty sheds and ate thin soup and black bread. These mats and partitions were built by us after our shifts. We cut the wood and grass ourselves. The extra food is a reward from the Lord for our hard work. You lazy newcomers want to reap what we sowed? Dream on. The 17th squad jeered. Hark retorted, though his eyes darted nervously. As the son of a bankrupt merchant, Hark had been chosen by Ulu for his wit. He considered himself superior to the crude slaves. He had observed that the white-haired lord was strict but benevolent, rewarding hard work with better conditions. He figured a riot would, at worst, earn him a reprimand. He hoped to secure benefits for his men and bolster his own authority. The shouting escalated, pushing the situation toward a violent brawl. The security team members struggled to hold the line with their wooden staves. Their pleas for order were drowned out until a thunderous roar silenced the crowd. Everyone, shut up. Ulu sprinted in, screaming, "The Lord is here." Silence fell instantly. All eyes turned to the calm, young figure standing at the edge of the crowd. I walked through the parting crowd, my gaze sweeping over the trembling slaves. I stopped before Hark and Scarface. "You too," report. Scarface knelt immediately, reporting the truth. Hark had incited the riot and slandered the Lord's fairness. Hark knelt too, feigning tears and playing the victim. "My lord, you must seek justice for us newcomers. Scarface is right, but we are new and lost. We do the dirtiest work, yet live in the worst sheds and eat the worst food. We just want fairness, my lord." He avoided mentioning his incitement, hoping for sympathy. I listened impassively. Fairness. Is what Scarface said true? Did they improve their own sheds and earn their rewards? It is true, Hark admitted, but I cut him off, my voice chillingly flat. "So, you aren't incapable of improving your lot. You are simply too lazy to work for it. So, you decided to incite a riot instead. You wanted to pressure me into redistributing their hard-earned property to you. Or perhaps you wanted me to force the veterans to hand over their belongings. Is that it, Captain Hark?" Hark trembled, his face turning paper white. The Lord's blue eyes seemed to pierce his very soul. This wasn't the script he had planned. "And my lord, I was only doing this for my brothers, for the territory." Hark stammered incoherently. I shifted my gaze to a young security guard holding a wooden staff. I remembered him. ATU, a decorated guard known for his meticulous nature. "You," I pointed. "ATU, correct?" The guard straightened, nervous. "Yes, my lord." My gaze remained like a deep pool as I issued a command that made the entire crowd gasp. "Kill him." The command left the area in deathly silence. Hark's calculation shattered into pure terror. He lunged forward, collapsing at my feet. He clutched my boots, slamming his forehead against the cold ground. "My lord, spare me. I was blinded by greed. I was wrong. I'll never do it again. Spare me, my lord. It's my first offense." Hark's wails pierced the silence. His 18th squad, previously defiant, now stood pale and hollow. ATU, the young security guard, stared at the Lord's icy, rock-like resolve, his stomach churning. Ulu, who had appointed Hark, turned ashen, realizing his own failure in leadership. "Mercy, I have vital information. Someone paid me to incite the new slaves and disrupt the Obsidian territory. I'll tell you everything. Please spare me." The crowd erupted in agitation. The 18th squad's confusion instantly curdled into pure rage. They realized they were merely tools in my scheme. With their fervor gone, they burned to tear the liar apart. I suspected Sabuda Medici's involvement. I needed this intel, but not through a public plea. As the master of the Obsidian territory and Lucerne City, I had already ordered an execution. I could not show weakness before thousands. "ATU," I said calmly, "what are you waiting for? Hold him down." A senior guard roared, lunging forward with another to pin Hark's struggling arms. They dragged him from my boots and forced him to his knees. Hark shrieked, losing control of his bowels as a foul stench filled the air. Slaves swarmed from all sides, encircling the area. Thousands of eyes locked onto the pathetic, soiled figure. ATU's hands trembled violently as he gripped his wooden club. This wasn't mere discipline. It was an execution. "ATU," his companion hissed urgently. ATU closed his eyes, then opened them, taking a heavy knight's sword from a guard. He raised the blade high, his hands shaking. "No!" Hark screamed as the blade descended with a sickening crack. The blow was clumsy. The blade embedded deep into Hark's shoulder. Blood sprayed like a fountain, causing the slaves to scream and retch in horror. With a bestial roar, ATU swung again with all his might. The head fell. I stepped forward, my boots staining with blood. Hark, as captain, should have led you to earn your keep. Instead, he incited chaos and challenged our order. He sought to destroy the peace we've built. Does he deserve to die? He deserves death. Scarface, captain of the 17th squad, roared first. His voice was filled with fury and absolute loyalty to the Lord. "Kill him. He deserved it." The 17th squad followed suit, their voices echoing in solidarity. The veteran slaves joined in, shouting their approval. Even the new slaves, cowed by fear, muttered, "He deserves it." I raised a hand. My territory has one rule: fairness. Merit is rewarded, and faults are punished. Let Hark be a warning. Do not follow in his footsteps. Long live the Lord. Long live Pendragon. The crowd roared with newfound fervor. A strange, ironclad unity settled over the residential area. I looked at the 18th Squad. Punishing them all would only breed resentment. 18th Squad, I said, softening my tone. You were misled. You are forgiven this time. The squad members looked up, stunned with relief. Many collapsed to their knees, weeping in gratitude. However, I added, your lack of vigilance has a price. Your rations will be cut by 20% this month. Thank you, my lord. They accepted the penalty as a mercy. I turned to the 17th Squad. You maintained order well. Ulu crawled to my feet, sobbing. I failed to manage my men, my lord. I deserve death. Silence, I commanded. Your failure will be addressed later. The 17th Squad will receive a 20% ration increase in materials to reinforce your quarters. Thank you, my lord. Ulu scrambled up, but I stopped him. After this, take 10 lashes from Captain Buck. Reflect on your failure. If you fail again, you'll be sent to the mines. Ulu trembled, but felt a strange sense of security. 10 lashes for his life was a bargain. He hurried off. Finally, I turned to ATU, who stood blood-spattered and shaking. ATU, I said, you and your men upheld the law well today. Go to the warehouse. Each of you will receive leather armor and a short blade. From now on, you will wear them while on duty. Thank you, my lord. The guards knelt, choked with emotion. I turned and walked toward the fortress, my white hair disappearing into the distance as the crowd watched in silence. 2 days passed, the tension snapping like a taut bowstring. Under the security team's relentless search and the slaves' desperate, fearful denunciations, the truth was unearthed. 3 spies hidden among the new slaves were discovered. They offered no resistance or excuses, immediately biting into hidden poison capsules. Their swift, rigid deaths prevented any further investigation. The internal threat was temporarily neutralized. At dawn, I finished a report on mine production and retreated into my thoughts. A blinding, deep purple light suddenly erupted. Purple. Salota Medici has secretly allied with the Free City-State Federation remnants in the poisoned Scorpion Canyon. They plan to partition my territory, population, and resources. 3 parties. I tapped my desk, a cold smile curling my lips. Such greed. Salota, you are truly ruthless and foolish. I stood up, pacing the study, my eyes gleaming with intensity. I couldn't touch Earl Aldis's petty schemes yet, as they were standard noble politics. But colluding with the Federation? That was a gift. I remembered the hostility I faced upon arriving in Thorn. To the western border, the Federation were blood enemies. This touched the kingdom's, and specifically the West's, most sensitive nerve, treason. It was a fatal political crime. It was enough to ruin any noble, even a duke's son. With even a shred of evidence, not even the southern duke could protect Salota. An opportunity, I whispered. I sat down, spread high-quality stationery, and dipped my quill in ink. To the Honorable Marquis Marcus Hohenzollern. Recently, while suppressing rebellion, I failed to capture the mastermind. However, I uncovered a shocking conspiracy. Baron Salota Medici appears to be colluding with the Federation remnants in poisoned Scorpion Canyon. He plans to supply them with grain in exchange for a surprise attack on Lucerne City while they raid my black territory, aiming to destabilize the West. Such acts of treason are unforgivable. Lacking absolute proof, I dare not act rashly and report this to you in secret. I took a breath. My black territory and Lucerne City have no ties to these rebels. My loyalty to the West is absolute and eternal. I finished writing, blowing the ink dry. Reading the righteous, loyal declaration, I felt a slight flush of embarrassment. I cleared my throat and called for my guard. Deliver this letter, sealed with the black dragon emblem, to Marquis Marcus in Thorn City immediately. Do not stop, and do not reveal its contents. The guard saluted and departed. I watched them leave, my cold smile returning. Salota, since you dance with scorpions, don't blame me for roasting you along with them. Sunlight filtered through the lake into the elven sanctuary. Time flowed slowly here. Princess, look what Gula brought back. A marmot bounded into the quiet space. Great Gulu carried several silver trout, presenting them to Irene. Fresh, caught by Gulu. Better than that human's cooking, he boasted, tail held high. Irene looked away from the void. She glanced at the flopping fish and Gulu's expectant face. A ripple passed through her starry eyes, then vanished. She replied emotionlessly. Hee, don't move, princess. Watch Gulu show you how it's done. He busied himself with dried branches. Build a frame, just like that human. He clumsily stacked the branches into a shaky tripod. He struggled to skewer the slippery fish, covered in scales and slime. Irene watched the chaotic scene, which strangely mirrored a memory of that human skillfully roasting fish by a campfire. The fire crackled, and the scent of charred fish filled the air. Why him again? Irene frowned slightly. His image haunted her. Persistent, she whispered, gripping her fingers. Done. Great Gulu's fish is ready. The fish were charred black, with only faint traces of white flesh. A pungent, burnt smell replaced the aroma. Gulu looked at her with shining eyes. Try it, princess. I followed the steps perfectly. Irene hesitated, then tore off a small piece of the charred meat. She tasted it. The flavor was an intense mix of bitterness and fishiness. Her perfect face cracked for the first time. She quickly spat it out. She said, masking her expression. Better than that human's. Gulu froze, his excitement turning to immense grievance. Better? Then why did you spit it out? Do you dislike Gulu? Do you have another pet? He sobbed, his round body trembling. That human is mean. He ignores me. His fish is only a tiny bit better than mine. He gestured with his paw, his confidence wavering. You've changed. You used to be nice to Gulu. Now you won't even eat my cooking. He threw the charred fish to the ground. Gulu is sad. I'm running away and never coming back. His wails echoed through the sanctuary. Irene looked at the crying furball. She looked at the charred mess, then thought of the human who disrupted her heart. A headache began to form. It crept onto the elven princess's brow. If I were here, I would have forcefully shoved the fish into Gulu's mouth. Let her experience the delicacy she thinks she deserves. In my study, I took a deep breath, mentally accessing my information system to pray for guidance. A blue light flared, flooding my mind with data. At the Night Song Forest Sanctuary, Princess Aika and her companion Gulu had a falling out. Gulu ran away and is currently heading toward the Obsidian territory. I opened my eyes, my expression a mix of shock and absurdity. A tantrum? Over grilled fish? Running away to my territory? Why is that noisy marmot coming here? To cause trouble? A knock interrupted me. Captain Aika had returned. I dismissed the Gulu situation and ushered him in. Aika, dusty and thin in his merchant disguise, saluted. I checked him for injuries and asked about the state of Runestone City. Aika explained they entered the city at dusk disguised as fur and iron traders. Security was tight, but guards focused on weapons and food, ignoring small-time merchants. The real challenge was the training grounds in the west of the city. They spent time scouting and eventually spent some coin. They bribed a low-level procurement officer to locate the training grounds. During a guard shift change, Aika and two others slipped through a gap in the wall. I frowned at the risk. Aika stood tall, noting that they were spotted while leaving, forcing a desperate breakout. In that life-or-death moment, he broke through to silver rank. I praised him, delighted by the unexpected gain. Aika reported that they hid in the brush outside the grounds for a full day and night. Runestone City has about 400 soldiers. They are well-equipped, but lack morale. Sabuda is forcibly conscripting all able-bodied men, using brutal methods. His forces will likely reach 500 soon. I calculated my own strength. 350 veterans, 40 Black Raven Knights, and 200 new recruits under Buck, totaling 600. With Buck, a gold-tier knight, and superior quality, I felt confident. Aika added that the city is filled with resentment. Even with Count Aldis's promised 200 private soldiers, they only have 700.